I did not make this fanfic, support the author in the link below. What Doesn't Kill Me by TheSilverboar. Chapter 21. And once again, I feel like I have to address some reviews from last time. One of the reviewers commented that having All Might discuss the selection process and get other opinions besides his own demean choosing a successor and makes it just a job interview. Honestly, that is one of the dumbest takes I've seen for a bit. All Might is the first wielder who was able to take the time to carefully choose his successor. They even mention in the anime that several past users had weak quirks because they were just the first person that the prior torchbearer had come across who wouldn't instantly side with All for one. So yes, All Might decides to bring in those he trusts about this, he actively wants their opinions and takes them into consideration. So yes, the others would say what they think All Might should do because they're being asked for their fucking opinion. Second, to the person who referred to Izawa as a dipshit who has made more villains than heroes, this Izawa is different than the one in canon. Also, not only was he not the one who suggested Izuku spar with the next one for all user, he wasn't in the room. And even if he was, stating that someone would make a good sparring partner for a person who got a power boost and would be figuring out those new limits isn't devaluing their life as you put it. And 2. Also, I do like a suggestion made about societal pillars for field outside heroism. And 3. Also, so glad to finally be at the sports festival arc. I've been looking forward to writing some scenes for this story that place here and in the arcs that follow. Planning out who would win round 2 of the sports festival, as well as the subsequent brackets for round 3, took some planning though. And 4. One last thing, in regard to Yanagi's speech habits. When I started writing this I thought she was supposed to be overly verbose and long-winded, as it was what the wiki implied, the dub not being out to that point yet. I've thought of a way to get her speech habits to more closely resemble the canon Yanagi from a certain point going forward, so that way we won't have the super long sentences, while I also won't have to go back and rewrite several chapters. Chapter 21. Izuku. Sitting with his back against a locker, Izuku focused on his breathing, leg bouncing as his class milled about, the room full of nervous energy as they waited the signal to enter the arena. Around him, he could see his classmates all making their various preparations ranging from Aoyama, ensuring his support belt was in good order, to Yaoyorozu muttering to herself while she flipped through a large book that was full of chemical compounds. And Mineta praying to a shrine in his locker that seemed to be just dedicated to boobs. Around him, his closer friends of Mina, Kirishima, Hagakure, and Uraraka were adjusting their gym uniforms or doing stretches, Todoroki and Kendo standing a bit away, but also subtly glancing their way every now and then. Ever since Izawa had told him about the death of the water hose heroes, his friends had never let him alone, so long as they could help it. Trips to the karaoke bar now included Uraraka and Hagakure, with talks of inviting some of their other classmates in the future. Kirishima and Tetsu would each take him to their favorite workout spots, the two seeming to be in competition on who could find the best place to get them gains. Mina would take him to her favorite arcades, more specifically the dance games at said arcade, where she was insistent that he'd get good enough to put his name on the high score chart. Uraraka going with him as he showed her around the town more, his gravity-defying friend still new to the area, so she'd roped him in as her unofficially official tour guide. Tokage would take him to different fun hole-in-the-wall places as well as anything that related to dinosaurs whatsoever. His fellow Greeneat was as nerdy about dinosaurs as he was about quirks. Hagakure had been taking him to various malls, more specifically the clothing stores within. She mentioned that since her body couldn't be seen, she'd gotten used to expression herself with her clothing and personality. Given that high understanding of clothes and fashion, his casual clothes of funny shirts, such as his favorite t-shirt that was labeled t-shirt, she felt utterly upset at his choice in wardrobe and kept making threats to break into his home and destroy his shirts. Izuku was 90% sure his mom wouldn't let her, maybe 85. As she'd yet to succeed, it was more often her flustering him by making him give opinions on whatever she chose to model. Inagi had started taking him to small internet cafes where they could browse the web together, his verbose friend being a veritable meme lord. When not doing that though, they'd often hit up bookstores or even just go to the beach he had cleared up, enjoying taking walks together and seeing how people reacted to beach that had once been a garbage dump. His mom had joined in on their efforts too, often having him help her in the kitchen as they cooked or baked together before finding new shows or movies to watch while they ate the fruits of their labors. She'd also been frequently inviting his friends over to all hang out together, having given all of his friends bone-breaking hugs the first time he brought them over. Although he didn't need the teasing about how many pretty girls my handsome young man spends time with. Tokage and Mina were still teasing him about that one. There's the light. Yaoyorozu looked at the light above their locker room door. Let's go everyone. You heard the boss lady, put on your game faces. Kendo added, trying to psyche everyone up as they began to march out towards the stadium, the booming voice of Present Mick reaching them as they exited the tunnel. And first to the field we have Class 1A. Present Mick shouted as they stepped out into the light, the roar of the eager crowd giving him chills. They already survived a villain attack and are ready to show if they're ready for the big leagues. They've been working hard and are more than ready to show their growth. The tired but faintly proud voice of Izawa came out from the announcer booth next, Izuku just as surprised as the rest of his class that the perpetually tired man would agree to the role of announcer. Well, said Eraser. Mick continued, not losing any momentum or energy, and next, they might not have fought villains yet, but don't put them down for it. Class 1B is here and ready to show they're just as skilled as their counterparts in 1A. Aren't straight. The voice of Vlad King, the 1B homeroom teacher announced with a happy laugh from the booth, Present Mick, having apparently invited both homeroom teachers in to help announce for the first years, likely to avoid favoritism. The awkward self-censoring from the blood hero was amusing, though I'm telling you Eraserhead, my students are going to win this whole thing. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Present Mick cut off any further goading or retorts, but these two courses aren't the only ones competing today. These students might be from general education, but there's nothing general about them. Course C, D, and E are here to show what they can do, many even here to claim a coveted seat in the UA Heroics course. The three general ed courses stepped out next, most looking genuinely surprised they weren't being brushed off by Present Mick. It'll be interesting to see if they achieve it. As Awa piped up, back in my UA days, I was such a student myself. That little bit of trivia was a shock to hear, for his own class, as well as the general education students who started to look a bit more hopeful. Some of the people in 1B, like Bakugo, just sneered. After them we have our favorite little mad scientists. Present Mick pressed on, the support students, all decked out in various pieces of shiny equipment, and many even seemed happy at the unusual term of endearment here to show off their gear and their brains. We have courses F, G, and H. Within those classes, Izuku noted a familiar head of pink hair bouncing around, pausing once to give him the stink eye, before bouncing around again. To those unaware, the support course are permitted to bring any 3 pieces of gear that they themselves have built, which have also passed their teacher's inspection, so it will be quite interesting to see what the end result will be. Vlad King added helpfully. And last but certainly not least, we have our Masters of Management. Present Mick's volume hadn't dropped once the entire time. If people called heroes the backbone of society, then the management students and its graduates are the backbone of the hero industry. Please give it up for classes I, J, and K. My colleague has that summed up quite nicely. As Awa confirmed, now we turn things over to the field where Midnight shall act as master of the game's weight, who approved that. Nezu. Present Mick and Vlad King answered in tandem as Izuku could feel Azawa's frustrated sigh. I can feel the love boys. Midnight rolled her eyes although it was clear this kind of interaction was the norm among the heroic faculty, but you old fuddies up there aren't what's important today. No, it's you youthful heroes and heroines who get center stage here. And to start us off we have the student representative Izuku Midoriya, who placed first in the hero course entrance exam. Taking a steadying breath and ignoring the familiar sound of Bakugo's palms filling with angry explosions, Izuku walked towards the podium, his friends giving him reassuring pats on the back as he passed them. Thank you. Izuku nodded to his professor who handed him the microphone as Izuku readied himself, focusing on his fellow classmates rather than the crowd. Taking a deep breath, Izuku focused, his gaze hardening as those watching blinked in surprise. I know many of you will expect a happy flowery speech, something full of positive words, empty boasts, and no real meaning. Originally, that was even what I'd planned to do. But then, a few weeks ago, we lost the water hose heroes. Izuku felt a single tear go down his cheek at the memory, but pressed on, more than just amazing people, they were my personal heroes. They saved my life, they were some of the first to ever truly believe in me. Losing them made me think about being a hero. Both why I want to do it and the kind of person I want to become. So, to that I say to myself and to all of you here, if you aren't going to take this seriously, then leave. You could hear a pin drop in the stadium at that ultimatum. I don't care if you want to be a hero to make money. I don't care if you want to be a hero because you want to use your quirk more openly, because you want fame, because it's a family business, or even if you just think it's cool. But if you ever put those aims before saving others, what it actually means to be a hero, then you don't deserve to be one. The teachers hadn't stopped him yet, so he kept going. We're at UA, the time to hone our skills so we can save lives, and with the attack on the USJ, it's clear that the real world won't wait for us. I plan to fight my hardest today, to treat everything like it's the real world, and give every event my all. This is the best chance to become stronger, to push our limits. If you're going to hold back, going to try and manipulate the odds for a trophy rather than improving yourself as a hero, then you don't deserve to be in a hero's course. I'm not here to win, I don't care if I get a shiny gold medal, all I care about is being a hero. I will become a hero that the water hose duo could respect, a man that I can be proud of, and to the villains who attacked us, who would attack others, I'll become your worst nightmare. With that, he handed the microphone back to a stunned Midnight and rejoined his class. Several of those assembled to compete were looking stunned, but others were clearly affected by his words, looking pumped up and ready to fight their hardest. Why yes. Midnight coughed, shaking herself. Well, after that intense speech from our student representative, we can get ready for the first event. The first even as always will be a free-for-all event to eliminate all but the top 40 students, so I hope you're all ready for the UA obstacle race. Chapter 22. And glad to see the kind of reaction my speech got in the last chapter. I was kind of worried that you all wouldn't like it, so I'm glad to see my ability to write a speech went over well. If anyone has any suggestions on how I could improve in that area, though, please put it in a review. I was legitimately unsure on a lot of how I wrote that, so I'm very open to feedback. All for one. Fucking what, Shigaraki screamed, all for one, having opened a live feed to the bar to make sure the fifth disciple actually obeyed orders to study the sports festival. How is that little fuck healed? Something wrong, Tamura? If he had eyebrows, all for one would have raised them. That boy, the one they called Izuku Midoriya, is the same boy who Master Shigaraki told you of. Kurogiri answered for the still raging decay user. When we left, he was left without his limbs and his guts perforated by spikes of ice. Yet now he seems perfectly fine. All for one hummed, remembering Tamura complaining about not managing to capture a hero in training who already looked close to a Nomu when transformed, about failing to even get a DNA sample. But the question is this. Do the UA faculty have someone on hand who could heal such grievous injuries? If they did, it would mean All Might was secretly back to full health, which would not bode well. Is it something about this boy's quirk specifically? Meaning it'll be something he wants to either take for a Nomura himself, or was the boy truly crippled that severely and this is a decoy to save face? In which case he could expose the truth to damage the reputation of UA and the heroes. I am unsure, sir. Kurogiri's tone implied a frown hidden within the fog that made up the intelligent Nomu's body. Should I contact Jiren for details? Do so? All for one nodded, even Tamura pausing his rage to pay attention as Kurogiri made the call. If it isn't my favorite bartender. The ever-amused sounding information broker answer quickly. So, what can I do for my favorite customer today? The student representative from UA's first-year sports festival. I wish for details on his quirk. Kurogiri answered, his tone refined and professional. If he wasn't a Nomu, with the limitations that came with it, All for one would admittedly prefer to make the Warp Gate user a disciple. Sounds easy enough. All for one could hear the man typing a keys on a computer over the phone. Just use my worm to look into the National Quirk Registry and oh. What? Tamura demanded, what the hell does oh mean? Didn't know you were here too, Shiggy. Jiren chuckled as All for one could hear his disciple's blood pressure rising, and I said oh because the regular worm I use gives me access to most quirks unless they're more heavily encrypted. That kid's quirk is apparently important enough to get a classified designation. But can you get it? Kurogiri pressed. By the third task at the latest. Jiren assured, might have to call in a couple favors, but I know you're good for it, Kurogiri. The call ended as All for one hummed to himself. How interesting. Stain. Scowling, Stein stared down at his phone as he watched the UA Sports Festival live. So many children hoping to be heroes, so many potential fakes for him to one day purge. This Midoriya though, so close to truth it was painful. You don't care if they're in it for the money, for the fame. Stain spat out, that apathy towards the ambitions of falsehood, the one thing keeping this boy from a potential seeker of the truth. But Stain relent after a moment's thought, checking the time and area as he continued to wait for his chance to ambush that fake ingenium. He is still closer than most. Only time would tell if the boy would become another fake to be purged, a true hero such as All Might, or potentially even an ally in Stain's own crusade against the fakes polluting their society. Izawa. I am Shoto, your kid's got some balls. President Mick shook his head, their microphones turned off for the moment as Midnight went over the rules for the obstacle race. Think it'll mess up his internship chances? Kansas frowned, knowing how cutthroat and petty pro heroes could be. Some will keep from sending offers for sure. Izawa admitted with a nod, but there will be others who are genuinely interested after that. Not to mention I guarantee you that Best Genist will be sending an offer in the hopes of turning him into a noble and refined paragon. Bakugo will probably get one too. Mick grunted before they flipped the microphones back on, and here we are, ladies and gentlemen, are you ready to race? Izuku. Taking a steadying breath, Izuku got ready to move. Above the tunnel entrance a screen was counting down, the atmosphere tense as 221st year students got ready to race. By his side were his friends from class A and B, the trio from his sister class moving to start over by him having drawn some reactions from their own. "We've got this, you guys." Izuku spoke, working to psyche up his friends just as much as himself. "Hell yeah, we got this." Kirishima grinned, hardening his first for a super-powered fist pump with Tetsutetsu. The counter flashed. 3. Izuku clenched his fists, focusing as he worked to partially transform and gain his full form's enhanced stamina. 2. Beside him, Tokage and Yanagi began to float, ready to fly. 1. Mina and Hagakure were bouncing in place to stay loose. 0. Everyone took off like a rocket, Todoroki shooting past everyone as he slid upon a trial of ice that ignored the other testers, apart from Mineta and Bakugo who got frozen in place. "And they're off." Present Mick shouted, his voice still reaching the runners as they charged through the tunnel, Izuku's group managing to get just far enough ahead to not get caught in the pileup that the less planned out students had. A nice collection of students made it through the tunnel with Shoto Todoroki rocketing fast into first. "I must say that's some impressive control to only freeze 2 students down when he shot off." Present Mick commented. "Yes, and I believe that to be deliberate." Aizawa let out a tired sigh, Todoroki has been rapidly improving his ice's capture and mobility skills as of late, but I'm aware his relationship with the 2 frozen students isn't the best. "Fuck you, icy hot." Bakugo shouted, cursing on live television, the sound of an explosion's faintly reaching Izuku as well, meaning Bakugo was likely released now. Language. All 4 overseeing teachers chided at once. "Robots dead ahead." Todoroki's voice called back, small to building sized. "You heard the man." Izuku shouted back, Kirishima, Tetsutetsu, shield wall in charge. "Right." The 2 took a defensive position up front, ready and able to follow Izuku's plans. Aizawa. "Now what's this?" Present Mick let out an exaggerated gasp, "We've got a group made of students from both hero classes working together. That might just be a first for the first-year hero courses." "It's not a surprise." Aizawa nodded, Midoriya's tactical mind is exceptional, along with a near-professional analytic ability when it comes to quirks. "I wouldn't be surprised if that group has been training together to make sure to reach new heights for the sports festival." As they watched, the group continued onward, the hardening quirk users acting as a spearhead to cut a path through the robots, many of whom had remained immobilized by Todoroki. The son of the number 2 hero had seemingly taken Midoriya's words to heart, being determined to win, while also working to keep his fellow students safe from the threats as he could. "Wait, why are they taking scrap from the robots?" Kansas frowned in confusion as they saw the group grab sheets of metal from the robots. It would seem they're being used as makeshift shields. Present Mick noted, the group adding more to the team's defensive capability as they continued their charge. By now, more students had escaped the tunnel with intention to catch up, something that was made possible thanks to all the frozen robots. "Is that Mineta clinging to the back of another student?" Present Mick gaped, microphone thankfully off for the moment, as they saw the small purple student hitching a ride on someone else. Given how badly Aoi Rosu was trying to shake him off, it clearly wasn't consensual. Yes, it is." Aizawa's expression was stormy as they turned the microphones back on. "Well, the students are making good progress through the Robo Inferno." Present Mick hid his irritation at Mineta's actions, Katsuki Bakugo making good speed in catching up to the front runners. Not caring at all for those he knocked aside in his rush. It was only him not directly blasting his fellow students, but the indirect actions hitting them, that was keeping them from pulling him out then and there. But Todoroki still holds a solid lead. Aizawa noted, using his control over ice to quickly traverse the wires of the fall. "That's right." Present Mick got excited for the second event, a deep pit dug by our very own power loader. "Don't worry, there's a net at the bottom to catch any who falls, but if you hit the net then you're out of the running." Aizawa observed as Todoroki finished crossing, Midoriya and friends still partway across, while Bakugo and the rest were quickly catching up. "Out of my way, losers." Bakugo sneered, flying over the group, his explosion staggering the group as they worked to cross the wires, knocking the Uraraka and Hagakure loose as they began to fall. The audience in the stands gasping and booing in shocked outrage. "Mina, cut the wire behind me." Midoriya jumped into action instantly, gripping the wire as the pink-haired acid quirk users did so without hesitation. "Yanagi, give me a push." The telekinetic user shoved with her power, pushing Midoriya faster as he swung down, catching the falling girls. "What a show of sportsmanship." Midnight's joyous cries carried. "A fine display of teamwork." Kansas nodded with approval, noting Tokage getting the 2 hardening quirk users over the gap as they began hauling the trio up, Uraraka making the 3 students holding onto the wire weightless to speed things up. "They've lost their places as front runners." Azawa noted as several other students managed to surpass the group as they paused to save two of their own from getting eliminated, but it fits with Midoriya's pledge. He doesn't care about winning, he cares about being a hero. By the time the group got up, the other competitors were either at the minefield or still way back at the Robo Inferno. Come on guys, I've got a plan. Midoriya gave a grin that would make Nezu proud as the team ran to the minefield edge and didn't start crossing. What are they doing? Present Mick asked dumbly, those in the audience just as confused. Oh no. Azawa and Kansas gaped wide-eyed, realizing what was happening in tandem, just as they gathered a large number of mines, telekinesis helping, before the group jumped onto the pile with their metal sheets shielding them. Oh my. Present Mick was on his feet, thrilled at this development. The AB Dream team is using the minefield itself to retake the lead. They're shooting up and they've surpassed Todoroki and Bakugo. The previous first and second place holders were gaping stunned for a moment before they worked to try and catch up. Unfortunately for them, Uraraka lowering the group's weight plus Yanagi boosting them further made that a pipe dream, the group sliding to the tunnel before running through. First place we have Izuku Midoriya. Present Mick screamed in jubilation as the crowd cheered, Yanagi and Tokage following in second and third, thanks to their flight, Kirishima and Tetsutetsu crossing at what seemed to be the exact same time, while Uraraka, Mina, and Hagakure brought up the rear. What a way to finish the first event. Kansas was just as pumped up as Present Mick. I for one, can't wait to see how things will continue with round 2. Chapter 23. And since people apparently didn't listen before, the following message will now be at the top of every chapter for this story until the situation changes. Clear as throat. I have not read the manga. Stop spoiling shit. Thank you. And 2. The omic at the bottom of the chapter is the last of the costume shenanigans bits. And don't worry, he will have a real costume that will come to play in the next arc. Shoto Todoroki. Eyes flitting about, Shoto considered the upcoming second task. A cavalry battle with first place formed, the first round being worth 10 million points. Bakugo had unfortunately gotten through to this round and, more unfortunately, so had Mineta after Bakugo's explosions in the beginning had blasted the little purple pervert free. Spotting the teams forming, an idea formed in his head as he walked over to the closest of the teammates he wanted. It's Shinso, yes. He approached the non-perverted purple student who looked confused at being approached. Yes, why? Shinso frowned puzzled. I want you on my team. Shoto gestured for the boy to follow. You don't want one of your precious Class A buddies? Shinso sounded bitter but followed regardless. One of my classmates needs to be removed from the hero course, so I'm helping you prove you can take his place. Shoto answered, not even bothering to look at Shinso as he continued trying to find his second partner, finally spotting her along with the last teammate he wanted. Come again? Shinso asked before letting out a yelp as Shoto tugged him over to Yaozu and Kendo. Yaozu, Kendo, I want you on my team. Shoto spoke up as the rep and vice rep turned towards him in surprise, but certainly weren't complaining at having his quirk for this. And is he our fourth teammate? Kendo nodded to Shinso. He said he wanted me to replace one of your classmates. Shinso still looked lost. Mineta? The girls asked in tandem as they looked towards him, completely unsurprised when he nodded. Am I missing something? Shinso looked between the three of them. While the girls explained the Mineta situation, Shoto examined the other forming teams. Well, this should be interesting. Izuku. You ready for this? Kirishima was bouncing in place alongside Tetsutetsu, the two of them having joined Izuku's team along with Yanagi. Question is, are you ready, Kiri? Mina stuck out her tongue teasingly as she stood with her teammates, Hagakure, Uraraka, and Tokage. Born ready. Kirishima and Tetsutetsu shared a heart and fist bump. We got our manliness, we've got our teamwork, and we've got Midori Bro's plan. Indeed. Yanagi nodded happily. Midoriya's plan is most impressive in its simplicity to take advantage of the minimalistic amount of rules and the inherent nature of the event in question. Even so, due to our group being the only ones to, as of yet, demonstrate any teamwork on which this task is crucial, I believe I can confidently give the statement thus. As Kirishima and Tetsutetsu would say, Yanagi gave a cute little clearing of her throat before she lowered her voice as deep as it would go, we got this. So, Midori, how come you didn't use your quirk in the first event? Mina asked as the last few teams got decided, and why is that girl glaring at you? The second question being about another girl with pink hair and yellow eyes, this one covered in support gear as she stood next to Mineta, apparently being on the same team. I actually did use some of my quirk in that first event. Izuku answered proudly, I've been getting better at doing partial transformations. I haven't managed to go from a partial to a full yet though, I have to turn off the partial transformation and then transform fully still. Even I wasn't sure if any other obstacles would have the size of my full transformation be a hindrance like that first gate, so I decided to just save it for here. Told you it wasn't him wanting to be dramatic for round 2. Hagakure let out a smug ha as she apparently pointed at Mina and Tokage, who grumbled but handed over some yen. Ignoring the blatant gambling his friends were doing over him, Izuku continued to answer. As for her, he trailed off with a wince. She's from the support course and is one of the ones Aizawa-sensei warned us about who take their craft very seriously. She doesn't apparently think about the quirks of who she makes gear for all the time though, but of just making stuff and getting her name out. There was another costume incident she hadn't forgiven me for. And he wasn't saying anything else on the matter. Alright everyone, to your places. Midnight called out before his friends could press for details at the incident which he'd rather not remember. Game time girls. Izuku worked to psych himself up. Bro. Kirishima and Tetsu gestured to themselves confused. I know what I said. Izuku responded as the two gaped indignantly, while Mina and Tokage cackled happily at the shade being thrown to their best friends. Belling Yanagi up onto his shoulders, Izuku observed the other teams, ignoring the glares from Bakugo and the other blonde on Bakugo's team. He could see all the eyes on the headband Yanagi was wearing. Are you ready? Midnight called out, cracking her whip as Izuku saw everyone tensing. On your mark, get set, go. Yanagi. Izuku shouted out as the silver-haired telekinetic pulled every headband but her own, Tokage's, Todoroki's, and the one being worn by a girl from 1B with vines for hair at Yanagi's request. What a sudden upset. Midnight called out as the scoreboard updated itself to show every team but 4 at 0 points. But I guess if you already have a target that big on your back, no reason not to make it bigger if it gets you an edge. Mina, if you would. Izuku turned towards the Pinkette, who generated a massive blob of acid as Yanagi dropped in the captured headbands, the ribbon sizzling away as the charging team slid to a confused halt and even the crowd quieted down. Is that allowed? A boy from 1B with a headband asked, confused. She never said it wasn't. Izuku gave a wide grin, and now there are only 4 headbands and 4 teams worth of spots into the final round. Now, anyone having a headband is a target. So, the question is, Izuku transformed as he spoke, Yanagi happily riding on his shoulders as he turned into his massive grey form, those from Class B not on his team gaping at the change. His massive hands grabbing the hardening Kirishima and Tetsu like they were Eskrima sticks. Can you take them? Aizawa. Aizawa blinked as he worked to process the utterly bizarre team formation. Using 2 of his teammates as clubs. Yes he is. Present Mick was likewise gaping. Calling it now, that's going to become a meme before the round ends. Kansas ran a hand down his face. Strategy for the headbands is good though. Before everyone was going to go after him because of that point total, but now you need a headband just to get to the next round, the points not even mattering anymore. Why does Monoma look like he's manipulating Bakugo? Present Mick noted the 2 blonde boys of 1B, the copy quirk whispering something rapidly towards Bakugo, who seemed to be, reluctantly, listening. Because he probably is. Kansas SI twitched as they flipped a switch, the arena filled with microphones, so they could listen in on the competitors and make sure there was no untoward behavior being revealed to be addressed later. That useless fuck doesn't have a quirk like that. Bakugo was snarling, he's using trigger, has to be. Kid really needs to get those complexes in check. Aizawa frowned, fully aware of Bakugo's superiority and inferiority complexes, a combination that Monoma shared in his own way and a fusion that none of the teachers had been able to nip in the bud as of yet. I get it, Bakugo, I get it. Monoma's tone was deliberately understanding and not argumentative as he manipulated the explosion quirk student, but if you beat him here, then a lot of people will just say that you only got it because it was a team event. Let him get through to the 3rd round, that's always one-on-one fights. Then nobody can say you didn't beat him on anything but your own power. Fine. Bakugo snarled, charging towards Shiozaki to forcibly take her headband. Todoroki had gone over to Midoriya and made a large ice wall to cut the other 3 headbanded teams away from the rest of the competition, leaving it just a race for Shiozaki's points. Think anyone will try to? Aizawa began to ask if any of the teams would try to get over or through the ice when Hatsume, with Mineta on her shoulders, rocketed up with her boots to try and go over the ice. That answers that question. Think it'll war. Mick began only for Midoriya to swing Kirishima and Tetsu to smash apart the hover boot she was riding in on, Mineta's sticky balls caught by Yanagi's telekinesis and sent to further gum up Hatsume's support gear engines. To wrap it all up, Todoroki froze them in place once the duo was on the ground, never mind. And now Bakugo took Shiozaki's headband. Kansas nodded, noting how Monoma copied Tsuburaba's quirk as the 2 worked to make air walls to prevent anyone else from getting close to their points. The fights of the last round are going to be intense. Mick. Hero costume attempt 3. Izuku. You're kidding, right? Izuku looked down at the costume he was in. It was covered in metal and various pieces of tech, bright lights and devices shining and blinking eagerly to be used. What, you think you're too good for my gear? The pink-haired girl demanded, my babies are the best you'll get. You might not have wanted anyone else's support equipment, but there's no way you'll refuse mine after you use it. Does she even know what my quirk is? Izuku looked over at the tired-looking support teacher. I don't think she ever bothered to check, no. Power Loader shook his head, just get this over with. Relenting with a sigh of his own, Izuku transformed as his body grew and the device-covered suit broke apart, every bit of support gear breaking from the expansion or the fall to the ground, as he was just left in his size, altering UA tracksuit. My babies. Hatsune cried out as she cradled the broken pieces, you monster. You villain. I'll get you for this. How dare you break my babies. As she ranted, Power Loader just plucked her up like an angry kitten, carrying her off back to the support lab. Damned it Hatsune, this is why I tell you to pay attention to who you make things for. Chapter 24. All for One. Humming to himself, All for One continued to observe his surroundings, his multitude of quirks still allowing him to see even without a proper face. Currently, the students were on break for lunch and relaxation events before the intense final round. The phone ringing drew his attention from that screen though as Kurogiri clicked to answer Jiren, I assume you have answers. Of course. The smug drawl of the information broker resonated through the phone, when have I ever failed to come through? Smug little Shigaraki growled before Kurogiri cut him off. What have you found Jiren? The shadowy warp gate user demanded. Kid has quite the power, although he's apparently only understood it properly for a little over a year or so. He heard Jiren let out a puff from his cigarette as he spoke, Kid's power is called adaptation. Anything he survives he becomes more resistant to in his transformed state. His quirk also comes with a healing factor that's deemed as minor due to the fact that it's not rapid regeneration on the part with that Nomu guy you showed before. But so long as he's alive, he'll heal within 24 hours. Fucking bullshit. Tamura yelled, smashing the bottles upon the counter of Kurogiri's bar, I'll tear that cheating little shit apart. I'll murder him. Tamura was breathing heavily, scratching loud enough that All for One could hear it. Wait, no, that's too easy. I'll turn him into a Nomu. Yes, that'll work perfectly. A brainless little puppet that can never bother me again. Master. The voice of one of his acolytes spoke up in his ear, I believe that would be a waste. His quirk would prove quite advantageous. Of course, my friend. All for One gave an unseen nod, silently grateful that this particular quirk was unknown to Shigaraki. This brand of telepathy allowed him to commune with those he connects to it over any distance, but the drawback was that he could only speak to one at once. He never told Tamura for the sole reason that he'd rather not have the brat pestering his very thoughts every hour of every day. Tamura. All for One cut off the boy's ranting, he will not become a Nomu. Who was that? Jiren sounded confused. Your payment will be sent though the usual channels Jiren. Kurogiri assured the broker, not answering who All for One was as the call ended. But master. Shigaraki sounded utterly confused at being denied. No Tamura, I have other plans in mind for this boy and his quirk. All for One's voice was firm, silently noting he might have no choice but to inform Tamura of the other acolytes soon. We will discuss this more later, for now I wish you to continue with that little homework assignment I gave you. Yes, master. Tamura relented with a petulant sulk. My word. Kurogiri sounded stunned as All for One turned to the screen, seeing several of the UA students in skimpy cheerleader outfits, expressions making it clear they were duped and just figuring that out. A small purple boy with balls for hair clearly enjoying themselves. It would seem that one of the teachers is quite angry. All for One saw the glowing red eyes of a teacher leading the purple-haired boy off, while other faculty members escorted the tricked girls out of the camera sight. Aizawa. Mineta. Aizawa's tone was livid as he glared down at the trembling boy, as of right now, you are expelled from the UA hero course. What Mineta looked shocked, but you said I just had to get a high enough ranking in the festival to keep my place. I made it to the top 42. Did I need to get to the final round? You're mistaken Mineta. Aizawa's eyes were still glowing red as he spoke, his frustration with the boy bleeding through, you were told that you must both impress the faculty and show you deserve to remain in the hero course. It wasn't just a question of placing highly, but if you could fix the issues that caused that ultimatum in the first place. You've yet to even apologize to those you've harassed, let alone even try to improve your behavior. And here. The second you believed you were safe you tricked several girls into humiliating themselves on live television, also you could leer over them. As of this moment you're no longer a part of Class 1A, I'll be conferring with Nezu to find out if you're even going to be allowed to stay a student at this academy. For now, I suggest you go home, you've done enough already. Hisashi Yamada. So, how'd it go? Hisashi asked as he heard the door open, not even bothering to look over as Aizawa returned from dealing with Mineta. He'd apparently thought that just getting to the second round guaranteed he wouldn't be expelled. Aizawa rolled his eyes as he took his seat in the commentator's booth once again. Like every other one we've had to give that ultimatum to. Kansas sighed, think anyone will ever actually grasp that we're looking for more than just punching shit hard if they get put on a chopping block like that. We can hope. Aizawa sighed as he took his seat, Hisashi flipping on the microphone as the winning 16 from the Cavalry battle lined up for the next round. And we are back. Hisashi called out, eager announcer voice back in full, and we're here for the third and final round. This time it'll be a one-on-one elimination tournament. Each round the fights will be randomly selected, so our first years won't be able to know in advance who exactly they'll be fighting. A hero must be prepared to fight the unknown, so this is the perfect way to begin to experience this. Aizawa added in helpfully. And our first competitors are. Hisashi hit the randomizer button as a large screen above the arena flashed through various images, finally selecting the two fighters, Hitachi Shinso and Tageru Kamakiri. One of your students is up first, Kansas, your master of blades, and they're facing the dark horse of the general studies program. So, let's see what they can do. Hisashi called out before flipping off the microphone as the two students started heading to the arena while the rest of the competitors moved to their viewing booths. So Kansas, think your kid'll pull through? Aizawa observed them, pulling out one of his many juice pouches. I want to say he'll make it, but I know better. Kansas eyed, Kamakiri is a hothead and easily goaded. I can't see him keeping his mouth shut when that Shinso kid gets going. As Kansas finished his reluctant admission, the two competitors finally stepped into the arena, Midnight gesturing for them to begin, while they had the arena microphones ready to hear what Shinso said to Kamakiri. So, this'll be easy. That blonde Pomeranian thug did most of the work during the second event. Shinso snorted with a smirk, if all you could do was carrying around his ego, then I have nothing to worry about. You little son of was all Kamakiri got out before he went slack, eyes glazing over. Good. Now turn around and walk out of the arena. Shinso commanded as Kamakiri did so, the crowd and students all confused and trying to figure out what was going on. Told you? Kansas sighed sadly. Izuku? Firming his resolve, Izuku started walking up to the arena, his friends cheering him on as he climbed the steps. From the other end he saw his opponent for the first round, Monoma. The blonde had seen how his quirk looked in the second round, but unfortunately for the copy quirk user, he didn't know how Izuku's ability worked, while discussions with Yanagi, Tokage, and Tetsutetsu had already informed him of the copy ability long ago. Ready boys? Midnight asked as he and Monoma took their places on the concrete platform, the sounds of Izuku's classmates in 1A, as well as his friends from 1B all cheering him on, Monoma sending a dark scowl to those from 1B cheering for the Greenite. Ready? Izuku narrowed his eyes at Monoma, not liking how the blonde was looking at Yanagi and the others. More than ready to get rid of this one occur. Monoma sneered. Then begin. Midnight raised her riding crop as Izuku charged, going just slow enough that he knew Monoma would get a chance to tag him. Ha! Monoma cackled after the lightest of touches, the two now on opposite sides of the arena from when they'd started, let's see how you handle me now. Monoma charged at Izuku, both of them transforming in tandem. As he changed, Izuku grew, bulking up as his skin darkened to gray and hair paled to white. Bone growths that he was sure would one day become spikes rising up. Letting out a primal roar, Izuku reared back his arm and threw a punch at his approaching enemy. As he charged, Monoma activated a stolen quirk. But while Izuku grew several feet and bulked up massively in terms of muscle, Monoma grew barely an inch. They both had gray skin and white hair, but Monoma lacked the bone growths or air of ferocity, his punch meeting Izuku's as his arm buckled. Monoma might have copied his quirk, but he'd never built up resistances. Yanagi and Tokage had told him before that Monoma could copy a stockpile quirk, but not the stockpiled resources that made it viable. He'd figured that Monoma would get his quirk at how it was when he first used it, and he was correct. What? Monoma was whimpering and clutching a potentially broken arm, having rolled and ragdolled from Izuku's punch. Occur, am I? Izuku narrowed his eyes as he charged at Monoma, slamming a punch down as Monoma hastily rolled to dodge, eyes frantic as the blonde realized he didn't have any other quirks he could copy, and the one he copied he couldn't use, then what does that make you? Izuku cracked his knuckles, so what will it be, Monoma? Will you surrender or will I have to eliminate you by force? You don't talk down to me. Monoma charged, trying to land a kick as Izuku gripped his leg. Then make me. Izuku swung and threw Monoma bodily from the ring, and never look at my friends the way you did again. Winner, Midoriya. Midnight declared as the medic bots took Monoma to Recovery Girl. If they were quick enough then they could get Monoma there before the copied quirk went away, meaning Recovery Girl could heal him easily. And the next round we have. As Izuku got off the stage, he looked up at the screen to see who would fight next: Katsuki Bakugo and Ichako Uraraka. Izawa. You saw the board first. Hisashi shouted, his expression not matching his voice's energy as he worked to hide his concern over the matchup, the gravity-defying Infinity Girl of Class 1A against the Class 1B's Furious Kaiser of Demolition. Who will win? Who will go to the next round? Let's find out. At that, he flipped their microphones off. Kansas, you've worked with the kid more than we have. Shoto turned towards his colleague, and we already know the kid has a grudge against Midoriya. Will he try to take that out on one of Midoriya's friends? Kansas was silent for a moment before speaking. Bakugo is strong. He's gotten more control of his strength since those first couple heroics classes, but he still goes as far as he's allowed, pushing that boundary as much as he feels he's able to. I want one of my students to win, but I also know there's a solid chance of him losing control if he's angry enough to make denials of trigger use. Have Midnight and Cementus ready to intervene as needed. On it. Hisashi nodded, pushing a pager as the two faculty on hand by the arena were prepared, the message sent alerting them to why. As Hisashi handled that, Shoto focused on the arena and the two students approaching each other. Uraraka had a determined expression as her friends cheered her on. Bakugo was glaring at her, eyes occasionally flitting over to Midoriya. Midnight gave the signal to begin as Bakugo blasted forward, the ground shattering behind him from the force of his explosions, while Uraraka's eyes widened at the sudden burst of acceleration. His aerial control is impressive. Shoto admitted as he saw the boy fly through the air, he's shown that in all 3 challenges so far. But I'm not sure if that was the wisest idea for this fight. Hisashi noted as Uraraka managed to do a partial dodge, taking a weakened hit so she could stay close enough to tag Bakugo with her quirk and take away his gravity. Same could be said of Uraraka's idea there. Shoto noted as the girl quickly moved, grabbing the rubble from his earlier action, while Bakugo learned to orient himself in the air. Given he wasn't touching the ground outside the ring, then the blonde bomber wasn't out yet. True. Kansas nodded as they saw Bakugo adapting quickly. Bakugo's brash and angry, but he has a talent for combat. He's adapting quicker than Uraraka expected, it seems. They saw her throw the stones at Bakugo, the weightless rocks flying fast, but Bakugo was faster, the missiles unable to keep up with the aerial explosion user. Uraraka kept throwing more and more rocks as Bakugo dodged them and rocketed towards her. At the last moment though, Uraraka returned the gravity and dodged away as Bakugo suddenly wasn't being propelled enough and stumbled, rolling to the ground. As he fell, Shoto saw Bakugo slap a palm to the ground, firing his explosions as he flung it outward, rubble firing at Uraraka like shrapnel as she negated her own gravity and jumped upward, returning her own gravity once she was out of danger from the shrapnel. Stop screwing around. Bakugo's rage was clearly growing at someone using tricky strategies to fight him rather than coming straight at him. Make me. Uraraka shouted back as she landed back on the arena. Still, thanks to her earlier use of missile rocks, Bakugo seemed to be more cautious to avoid giving her more ammunition. Gladly. Bakugo's expression was wild, his grin near feral as he shot at Uraraka, spreading his explosions off to the side as well, so she couldn't dodge around him. Once he was close enough, Bakugo spun, slamming his explosion to the ground and sending the concussive force out and knocking Uraraka from the ring as the girl rolled on the ground. She was tricky but didn't have the resources of openings to take him out further, given the constraints of the challenge. Aizawa noted, fully aware that Bakugo's quirk worked best for this sort of challenge, while Uraraka needed something to use her quirk on. She was at a disadvantage going in, but had given it her all regardless. I'm just glad he didn't go too far. Kansas sighed. This time. Hisashi commented what they were all thinking. Izuku. Alright everybody. President Mick shouted as the next fighters took the stage. Here we are with the president and vice president of Class 1A. The Fists of Fury and Master Maker. Momo Yaoi Rozu and Itsuka Kendo. At that, Izuku and his classmates from 1A, as well as the purple-haired Shinso who worked with them in the Cavalry battle, cheered for both girls, eager to see what their trusted class reps could do. So, Midori bro. Tetsu drew his attention as Izuku looked at his 1B friends who were sitting with his group from 1A, the two classes having a large viewing booth. Even if most of the classmates were trying to stick with just their own class, who are you expecting to win? That's honestly a hard one. Izuku admitted as watched the two girls. Kendo is by far the stronger physically. Plus, with her quirk being simpler, she's able to focus on what it can do more. Yaoi Rozu has a much more complicated quirk that, while it gives her the ability to make more items to provide versatility, she has the problem of having to learn more things to utilize it as compared to Kendo. It could honestly go either way. Is it wrong that I'm hoping Yaoi Rozu would win just so we could see her make a giant fire extinguisher to hose down Bakugo in the next round? Uraraka asked sheepishly, her clothes singed from the last fight. Her opponent still sending dirty looks their way. I don't know, imagining Kendo bitch slapping him with a big all hand sounds funny too. Mina offered with a grin and a bumped shoulder with Uraraka. Begin. Midnight's shout reached their booth as the two girls charged each other, Yayoi Rozu drawing a staff from her arm as she swung at Kendo who blocked it, using her hands as a shield. Kendo didn't even budge. Hagakure gaped at Kendo's impressive physical ability. Like I said, she's stronger. Izuku began even as Yayoi Rozu prepared a flashbang from her arm, but Yayoi Rozu has versatility. Kendo was staggered back from the blinding light, eyes clenched shut, even as she deflected Yayoi Rozu's next staff strike, clearly used to fighting even without perfect visibility. Possibly from whatever dojo she studied in. Is that a fucking cannon? Tokage gaped as the class rep for Wana used her opponent's temporary blindness to create a full-sized cannon. Yep. Izuku and the rest of his classmates who'd grown used to her making those things all gave a resigned nod. Surrender, Kendo. Yayoi Rozu got the cannon point blank on her opponent who finally blinked the spots from her eyes. You don't have any room to dodge. I yield. Kendo sighed in resignation as Yayoi Rozu was declared the winner. Endeavor. Come on, boy. Endeavor gripped the rail as he stared down into the ring, his youngest child walking out to meet his opponent, a boy named Kasate Tsuburaba. Show them what you can do. He'd watched Shoto in the first two tasks, using only his eye still, but with far more control than he'd shown when he found the boy having a breakdown after the USJ. The fight began with the Tsuburaba boy making a solid wall of air by expelling his breath, the solid wall pushing closer and closer to Shoto in an attempt to simply shove him out of the ring. This Shoto snarled as the wall hit, splaying his palms against the wall while digging his feet into the ground, making a platform of ice to push back. Won't stop me. Rearing back, Shoto threw a punch, shattering the wall with the sound of breaking glass. What? Tsuburaba looked stunned at someone just punching apart his wall of solid air. How the hell? I won't let anything stop me. Shoto shouted, rushing forward on a path of ice, the stone arena freezing over as Tsuburaba started slipping about, unable to keep his own footing. Not now, not ever. Rushing closer, Shoto reared his fist back, the ice crawling up Tsuburaba's legs, locking the air user in place, unable to escape Shoto's hard right blow to the face. The boy from 1B was at least somewhat creative, using his quirk to make a wall to stop himself from falling out, rather than just an attack. It was a futile effort though, Shoto still moving after him and landing a hard kick on his opponent's chest, this wall of air shattering just as the first had, Tsuburaba falling out of the ring with a hard thud. Winner, Shoto Todoroki. Midnight declared as the crowd cheered, Shoto's gaze finding Endeavor's own. Aizawa. This is going to get intense. Aizawa leaned forward as he stared at the screen, declaring the next fight to be Mina Ashido against Satsuna Tokage. I've been curious what the 6 remaining could do, given how often they train with Midoriya. It'll be something. Hisashi nodded, but at least we can trust these 6 to keep the fights respectful. Kansas, what are you doing? Turns out there are already memes about the Cavalry battle. Kansas was snickering as he looked at his phone. You're a teacher, damn it, act like it. Aizawa gave Kansas a look as the blood hero put away his phone to focus on the fight about to happen. Their job to introduce the fighters done, but they were still expected to add commentary if truly necessary, or to observe and be ready to intervene or have Midnight do so. As soon as Namuri gave the signal, the two girls started moving, Ashido sliding around, damn near skating as she secreted acid from her feet. Tokage, however, while staying fully joined together, took to the skies and started flying about. She can fly now, Hisashi gaped, having not seen the girl do so while still joined together yet. Yep. Kansas gave a boastful laugh, she might just win this whole thing for Class B, so get ready, Aizawa. The competitive barb was said with a playful grin at least. And did you teach her that, or did Midoriya? Aizawa didn't even bat an eye as Kansas sulked miserably. Damn, those girls are acrobatic. Hisashi noted the fight, Ashido seems faster and has more range with that acid, but it seems she's having trouble getting it to go up high enough to hit a moving aerial target. Tokage has the aerial mobility, but she can't get close enough to strike without risking the acid. That seems to be what she wants Ashido to think. Aizawa corrected, noting a small bit of color moving. Looks like Ashido is trying to avoid AoE sprays, probably to avoid any risk to the referees and spectators. Meaning Tokage has an advantage to exploit. At a hand. Kansas narrowed his eyes to focus in on the small speck. Yep. Aizawa nodded, his quirk granting him better sight than most, so he filled in his colleagues. Looks like Tokage is working to keep Ashido focused on her main body. Notice how she's been careful to keep one arm angled, so Ashido couldn't get a clear look at it with how fast Tokage is moving. She's keeping Ashido in the dark about the hand. Working on weaker AoE sprays might be a good idea for Ashido. Hisashi noted as Tokage finally managed to grab Ashido by the back of her shirt's collar, unbalancing the girl as the pink-skinned acid sprayer staggered back, leaving an opening for Tokage to fly in and slam her out of bounds. "I'll bring it up." Aizawa nodded as the girls got up, laughing and sharing a hug to show there weren't any hard feelings, the crowd cheering for the good sportsmanship. "Yanagi. I'm still gonna get you for that later." Mina pouted at Tokage as the two rejoined everyone, the stadium waiting for the next pair of fighters, Kirishima and Tetsu, to arrive for their bout. "You can try." Tokage blew a raspberry at Mina, but now we'll see whose moron is stronger. What are you doing? Holy shit, you guys are a meme." Mina, who'd gotten distracted by her phone, quickly showed it to the rest of them, a picture of Izuku in his powerful transformed state, herself on his shoulders, while Kirishima and Tetsu were being held as clubs, the standard meme text over the picture. "Seriously?" Tokage's head separated to get closer to the phone. Let me see. "Keep your pants on, girl, no need to give Zuku a heart attack." Mina teased as Izuku let out a protesting whine, unable to keep the corners of his lips from twitching in amusement regardless. "But come on guys, let's see." Mina got her phone out and started scrolling through the memes for their group to see what the captions were. "When you've got to beat a motherfucker with two motherfuckers. There are 4 brain cells there, and she is 3 of them. High schoolers, dense enough to be a weapon. In Soviet Japan, you are whooping stick. When you take my body as a weapon a little too seriously. Out to do a cavalry battle when nobody's allowed to touch your girlfriend but you. Relationship goals. Okay, that's enough." Izuku, red-faced, swiped away Mina's phone as the pincat cackled merrily. "And our boys have hit the field." Tokage bounced excitedly in her seat as they saw Kirishima and Tetsu take to the field, midnight calling for them to begin. Still amused and admittedly flustered by the memes, Ryiko glanced over at Izuku with a playful smile, clearing her throat as she prepared to keep her words succinct. "Go Kakuna. Use Harden." Izuku matched her grin. Metapod, use Harden as well. Izuku shouted. "Kakuna, use Harden harder." Ryiko tried not to giggle. "Maximum hardness." Izuku was barely containing his sniggers while the rest of their friends gaped at them. "Knock it off." Kirishima and Tetsu turned towards them, shouting at the same time before turning towards each other, "Stop copying me." "Sorry." Ryiko and Izuku apologized with sniggers as their friends rolled their eyes good-naturedly and went back to the fight. "In all seriousness, how are they doing?" Mina looked over at Izuku. "I know Kiri's quirk, but I haven't seen much of Tetsu's." "Well, for both of them it's a matter of attrition." Izuku summed up Kirishima in regard to his stamina, Tetsu in regard to the reserves of iron he's eaten. "They're both great fighters and have been improving the use of their quirks while we train, but at this point it just depends on who can hold out longer." He wasn't exactly sure how their reserves stood, so he couldn't tell. "That's fair." Mina nodded as the two juggernauts continued to wail on each other. "But don't those two train specifically to improve their stamina?" Tokage piped in. "Yeah, this is gonna take a while," Izuku admitted sheepishly. "I'll order snacks." Hagakure pulled up an app to call for concessions to the competitors, won't risk missing a fight they would need to study. Izuku. "Can't believe we need a tiebreaker after this." Kirishima sulked, he and Tetsu both looking exhausted from their endurance battle. "At least you're both memorable." Izuku patted their arms, eyes continually flitting down to the arena where Hagakure and Yanagi would soon be entering. "And have memes of just you two now." Mina showed her phone, which showed Kakuna and Metapod memes about the two hardening quirk users, along with the Cavalry battle memes. The joys of the speed of the internet. "Yeah, the memes." Kirishima rolled his eyes before giving Izuku a teasing grin. "So, you and Yanagi, huh? Who's gonna give you the shovel talk?" "I'm sure I could get Mr. Kansas to do it." Tetsu offered, grinning just as broadly at a chance for payback. Given Izuku's flustered flailing and their laughs, he guessed they got the payback they wanted. "Still, as much as I want to root for both of them, I don't think Hagakure will be able to win this." Izuku tried to change the subject back to the fights. "Her quirk, and more importantly her skillset, just aren't built for this kind of fight. If this fight was in a covered area and she was allowed to," he coughed, "wear her hero costume, then I'd say she'd stand a decent chance, but she's not allowed to strip down. The rules stated that the only reason you're allowed to be disrobed is if it's from them being destroyed or a side effect of a quirk. With no cover she can't use that to her advantage, since her style is very stealthy hit and run. In an open ring, Yanagi, who has telekinesis strong enough to pick up a person, is going to be able to beat her without much issue." Just as he said, the second the fight began, Yanagi grabbed Hagakure with her quirk, gently picking her up and removing her from the ring, while the invisible girl tried to break the grip, even succeeding in using her quirk to create light like a flashbang somehow, definitely something to look into. But all that succeeded in was getting her dropped to the ground out of bounds. And that's the end of the first round. President Mick shouted, "We'll have a short break before the tiebreaker and then start the second round. Who's ready for combined?" Chapter 25. And to those complaining about the switching between how characters are addressed, that's based on whose perspective that bit is. Aizawa would consider the other teachers to be colleagues and friends and likely refer to them by first name. If Izuku knew his teachers and referred to them as such, it'd be weird. He knows them by their hero names. Izuku. I still call bullshit. Tetsu grumbled as he and Kirishima sat in the stands, their tiebreaker having been an arm wrestling match that Kirishima won when their hardening fingers broke the concrete table and made Tetsu stagger. "I know, man." Kirishima pat his back, the Crimson Brawler not exactly pleased at how he'd won either, "but you still showed how manly you were in the event so far. And when I win, people will know the only reason you lost was because you lost to the champ." Kirishima flexed eagerly at that proclamation. Ahem. Tokage and Yanagi tapped their feet, giving Kirishima a look at that one. "I said what I said." Kirishima grinned at the girls as the stadium got readied, the roulette spinning to announce the first fighters of the second round. "And it's Katsuki Bakugo against Itachi Shinso," Midnight declared as the crowd cheered excitedly. "Hey Shinso." Mina called out, "Beat this and Uraraka give you a kiss." "Mina." A flustered Uraraka shouted, covering her face as she started to float, Tokage's floating hand grabbing her ankle so she didn't drift off. "Ian." Mina mock sulked before smirking eagerly, "Win this and Momo will kiss you." "Mina." The entirety of Class 1 shouted, many tossing candy and popcorn at the cackling Pinket. Quite the incentive. The exhausted-looking general ed students somehow managed to both deadpan and smirk at the same time, but something tells me if I try to collect, they'd just slap me. Perceptive. Kendo snorted bemused, patting a flustered Yayoi Rozu on the back. "Well, the angry Pomeranian is annoying, so I don't mind beating him on principle." Shinso shrugged. "The fuck you say, bitch?" Bakugo, who'd almost gotten out of earshot, eager to get to the ring, whirled around. Shinso didn't respond, he just smirked and started walking to the arena, clearly eager to start the fight. Izuku wasn't sure of all the facets of Shinso's quirk, but figured there's at least a chance of him winning, given what happened with Shinso's first match. "Think he can make Bakugo do the funky chicken on his way out of the arena?" Mina Tokage asked as the group snickered. Shinso. Keeping up his carefree smirk, Shinso observed his opponent, mind racing as he planned his strategy. He knew this brute's quirk caused explosions, and he knew that pain or a jolt could cause his quirk to deactivate. What he wasn't sure of was if there was recoil from this blonde bastard's quirk that would be enough to snap him out. "Alright boys, I want a nice clean match," Midnight declared, eyeing Bakugo warily as the blonde had on a bloodthirsty expression, apparently still upset about the Pomeranian crack. "Easy enough." Shinso shrugged, microphones still catching their opening comments, "Collateral damage isn't exactly part of my playbook. Never hurt to sell himself to the pros after all." "TCH." Bakugo sneered, "Let's just get this over with." "What's wrong, Goldilocks?" Shinso chuckled, so eager to lose. "Begin." Midnight signaled for the match to begin, having had enough of the trash talk. The second she dropped her arm, Bakugo blasted forward, "I'm gonna kill you, you damned extra." Bakugo shouted, eyes wide and filled with a manic excitement. Those eager eyes soon became glassy and flat as Shinso's quirk took effect. Unfortunately for the hypnotist, Bakugo was afloat when he went under, so even if the recoil wasn't enough to snap him out of it, falling on his face and breaking his nose certainly was. "Huh, that looks painful." Shinso hadn't taken a step, and Bakugo already took more damage than he had the entire sports festival, something Bakugo himself was aware of given his furious expression. "Shut up." Bakugo shouted, words mangled due to the broken and bloody nose as he charged, staggering from the quirk once again. It only lasted a moment before Bakugo righted himself and resumed charging, firing an explosion that Shinso quickly dove out of the way to avoid, brain hastily trying to formulate a new plan. "It's still an E." Bakugo shouted, bloody face adding to the angry expression. Dodging once more from the, thankfully, linear attacks, Shinso panted, figuring he only had one shot to win this. "I'm pretty sure Midoriya would have beaten me by now." Bewalking the furious response, just what he'd expected after observing the two hero classes, made Bakugo freeze once more. Knowing he only had a moment, Shinso charged, rearing his foot back and slamming them up between Bakugo's legs right as the Mad Bomber was coming out of the hypnosis, eyes bulging from the pain of the impact. Not wasting a moment, Shinso reared his fist back and punched Bakugo straight on the jaw, wincing at the pain to his knuckles, still not well trained in actual combat. "Die." Bakugo yelled, blasting him away before Shinso could try punching him again. Shinso rolling out of the arena, clothes charred and smoking, having barely been able to cover his face with his now burnt arms. Ow. He wheezed, head falling back with a thud as Midnight declared Bakugo the victor. Izuku. Cracking his neck, Izuku stared out at his opponent Kirishima, the red brawler bouncing from foot to foot, eager for a good match. You ready for this Midori bro? Kirishima punched his hardened fists together, this is gonna get epic. Don't waste your quirk taunting me. Izuku scolded his friend, wanting Kirishima to bring his all, the Redeed thankfully deactivating his quirk with a sheepish grin. Right. Kirishima chuckled, we're ready Midnight. Such youthful exuberance, it turns me on. Midnight declared as she cracked her whip, show us what you've got boys. With a roar, Izuku transformed and charged, throwing a punch at Kirishima leapt back, Izuku's fist breaking apart the concrete where his punch landed. Not shattering the stone, but still showing that this form was as strong as it looked. Gotta be faster than that bro. Kirishima laughed, hardening up to his maximum form and charging full throttle. I'll keep that in mind. Izuku took Kirishima's punch, using it to give him an opening to land a devastating counter-blow of his own. To his surprise, Kirishima twisted his body so the jagged parts of his form were where Izuku was punching, the level of hardness and sharpness of those spiked parts, combined with the force behind Izuku's own punch. Allowing Kirishima to overcome Izuku's resistance to cutting and actually make him bleed. Ha! Kirishima panted, expression already showing how strained he was, I hope that would work. Midnight, I'd like to forfeit. Izuku wasn't sure who was more surprised at that, himself or the crowd. May I ask why Kirishima? Midnight asked, putting the microphone where Kirishima could respond even as Izuku and his friend deactivated their quirks. You've yet to take much damage in this fight, are even the first one to damage Midoriya this much. Hiding Tetsu took up too much energy last round. Kirishima sounded frustrated with himself at the admission, I couldn't keep my quirk up much longer if I tried, let alone fight. But I did manage to damage Midoriya, meaning if this was a real hero against villain situation, then my teammates would have an opening to capitalize on. Seeing Kirishima's logic, and more importantly him stating it in a way to impress the watching pros, Izuku was very proud of his friend. Very well. Midoriya is moving on to the semi-finals. Midnight declared as the crowd cheered them both on, although Izuku was positive, he heard the crowd cheering for Kirishima more than himself. Yanagi. Come on, I'm telling you man it'll be great. Hearing the familiar voice of Kirishima, Ryiko turned to see Izuku, Kirishima, and the now recovered Shinso returning to the stands, Bakugo having come back not long after his fight had ended. What'll be great? Tokage asked, floating over to the boys like the Cheshire Cat, is it me? I'm guessing it's me. My fight is coming up and I do tend to be pretty amazing. We're trying to convince Shinso to join us in the gym. Izuku explained with a grin, he did great against Bakugo, but he already saw he doesn't know how to throw a proper punch and didn't have the upper body strength to actually knock Bakugo out. So, we're offering to train him. You should totally do it. Uraraka cheered, pulling Shinso down next to her as Izuku took his seat next to Ryiko herself once again. I'm not really Shinso, still showing frequent awkwardness at all the attention and possibly the positive encouragement if her assumptions were correct. Come on, think about it. Uraraka enthused eagerly, you could have beaten Bakugo if you had some more muscle, this'll help if you ever fight him again. I guess. A flushed Shinso relented, looking away awkwardly. So, given they aren't up here I'm guessing Todoroki and Yaoyorozu are the ones fighting this round. Izuku looked towards her, noting both she and Tokage were still in the seats. They are indeed. Ryiko nodded happily, I am looking forward to battling my compatriot in the next round. It should truly prove a most affable bout as we determine which of us shall be the one to take the golden symbol of victory for our class and grade. Although you will likely make quite the challenge to overcome Midoriya. Just give him a kiss and he'll be 2 days to fight back. Tokage grinned, high-fiving Mina as Izuku blushed brightly. If her warm face was any indication, then she was likely doing the same. Bad. Tetsu scolded, swatting Tokage with a newspaper that he'd once told her he carried around for just this purpose. Bad. Kirishima echoed, borrowing the newspaper to swat Mina. Alright. Midnight's voice distracted them before anything else could be said or done, Ryiko noting that the Todoroki and Yaoyorozu had arrived at the arena, is everyone ready for this? The competitors both gave serious nods, not saying anything as the crowd cheered and yelled for their favorite to win, then begin. At her words, Todoroki shot forward, ice racing from his foot and, to Ryiko's shock, fire from a hand as he shot towards his opponent. To her credit, Yaoyorozu was only stunned for a moment before she used her quirk to create a pistol, firing what were clearly rubber bullets at Todoroki, the elementalist leaping up, using his ice and fire to propel himself in the air. As he rose through the air, Ryiko saw Todoroki's hair become a horn mane of ice and flame, the ice beneath his feet freezing in mid-air to create a platform he shot towards Yaoyorozu at, fire spreading from his hand as he spun. Reacting rapidly, Yaoyorozu threw out her arms, foam that looked to be fire extinguisher material rocketed out from the heiress's skin, dousing the flames of Todoroki's acrobatic maneuver. Holy shit, this is intense. Kirishima and Tetsutetsu shouted in tandem. No kidding. Izuku was rapidly scribbling in a notebook he'd pulled from somewhere on his person. I've never seen any of these techniques from those two before. They must have been training hard for this festival. Although if they're showing it all now, do you think they consider each other the biggest threats or just aren't as worried about everyone else? Hagakure asked confused. Well, to be honest, Bakugo isn't really a threat to either of them. Izuku shrugged, feeling the murderous glare leveled at the back of his head at those words. Bakugo's quirk works by secreting nitroglycerin. All it would take was a bit of flame from Todoroki or some sort of ignition tool from Yaoyorozu, and they could set his explosions off prematurely. Their other point makes sense too though, as Yaoyorozu has the most tricks up her sleeve, given the fact that her quirk technically has few limits, and Todoroki has some of the most raw power in the school. Even his quirk, as broken as it was primarily a defensive one, all offense was up to his own training, and whatever openings his quirk gave him. As Izuku spoke, Todoroki had been freezing more and more of the arena. His flames melted much of his ice, but the other half of his body would just refreeze it again. The rapid thawing and refreezing creating more and more ice, cracking apart the arena as Yaoyorozu struggled more and more to keep her footing, her weapons unable to punch through Todoroki's frozen barriers, without also risking causing a serious threat to Todoroki's life. In the end, it was too much, and Yaoyorozu got overwhelmed, frozen up to her neck as Midnight called the match. It's our turn, girl. Tokage grinned, jumping up and holding out a hand to Ryiko to pull her up as well. Let's show these boys how it's done. Izuku found he was on the edge of his seat as he watched Ryiko and Tokage climb onto the stadium for the last round of the quarter-finals. He barely registered the call to begin, eyes focused entirely on two of his closest friends, duking it out to prove how far their training had come. At the cue from Midnight, both girls took to the sky, Ryiko using her telekinesis to pull herself through the air, while Tokage used the ability of flight without separation that he'd helped her discover. Man, it's crazy to see how well those two can fly. Tetsutetsu cheered eagerly, the girls locked in hand-to-hand combat a good 20 feet in the air. Inagi's quirk lets her lift the weight of an average person, yeah? Mina asked as they cheered their friends on, so wouldn't that mean she can't do much else if she's using her quirk to fly like this? I guess. Kirishima frowned, but I don't see what else she can do. Tokage's quirk makes her slippery, and I'm pretty sure splitting herself apart would break any sort of telekinetic grip Yanagi would have on her. Meanwhile, Tokage can fly. Uraraka picked up their other green-haired friend splitting herself apart mid-sentence, and do that. I wouldn't be so sure. Izuku grinned, noting Ryiko's expression. Look at her. Ryiko has Tokage right where she wants her. While staying floating in the air, Ryiko released a telekinetic shockwave, knocking Tokage's floating pieces around and disorienting the lizard tail splitter. But that achieved, it was simple to grab one of the smaller pieces and drag it to the ground before its owner could orient themselves, Ryiko never losing her altitude. She's been training, looks like she's boosted her quirk strength and how many things she can manipulate at once. Izuku gave a proud grin at his white-haired friend. Ryiko, huh? Mine gave him a teasing grin, making him realize how he'd been referring to her both aloud and, in his head, this whole time, his flush like putting blood in the water to the teasing shark that was Mina Ashido. And? I know everyone is probably surprised to see the fire here, but I do have an in-story reason that will get explained, so don't worry about that. Chapter 26. Endeavor. Gripping the railing, Endeavor looked down to the arena where Shoto and that Midoriya boy were stepping up for the first fight of the semi-finals. This fight could either help Shoto heal further from the events of the USJ or break him further, being forced to fight the one his son had injured so grievously. He hoped that this Midoriya could help, he knew his own methods were only able to do so much, even if Shoto had started listening to him more since then. At that thought, he remembered the flames his son had used against the Yaoyorozu girl, the talk he'd had with him after the match, and the revelation his son had made to him. Shaking those thoughts away, he focused on the fight, the microphone and cameras picking up Shoto shaking like a leaf. Several of the pro heroes in the crowd started shouting for Shoto to man up and other callous comments, Endeavor feeling a hot spike of rage in his gut at their words. Before he could say anything, or even think of what to try and say, the Midoriya boy had grabbed the microphone from Midnight. Shut the hell up already. The boy's eyes had gone from gentle and compassionate when looking at Shoto to suddenly livid as he glared out at the pro heroes. Those in the stands who'd been shouting demands were stunned to silence on the audacity alone. I can't. Shoto was clenching his fists, gazing almost fearfully at the ice forming around his hands. It would seem that even with all Shoto's training, the thought of using that same power against one who'd been hurt so grievously by it before was still too much. The USJ? Midoriya asked as Shoto gave a nod, unable to meet his classmate's eyes. At the mention of the tragic incident, many of the previously eager for combat heroes in the audience seemed to lose much of their fire. They remembered that these were still students, potential heroes, and ones who had experienced something traumatic far sooner than they ever should have. The fact that they were competing like this, pushing themselves like this, spoke volumes of their potential and raw determination, but it was not a flawless thing. Then we won't use our quirks. Midoriya gave Shoto a reassuring grin. Heroes get into situations all the time where their quirk either wouldn't help or would make things worse. Let's show these people what we can do without our powers. Yeah. Shoto nodded, back straightening as his resolve seemed to harden Miss Midnight. If either of us uses our powers in this fight, please disqualify the user. When Midoriya voiced his agreement, Midnight made yet another declaration of how it turned her on and called for the match to begin. I'm really glad that woman isn't in charge of teaching sex ed. Endeavor ran a hand down his face. Down in the arena, Midoriya and Shoto charged each other, each readying their raw combat ability. Midoriya, he noted, fought like a brawler, powerful punches and kicks, but little in the way of finesse or form. Shoto, on the other hand, showed flawless form for the various hand-to-hand techniques he'd included in his son's training. The downside was those had all been designed around the use of Shoto's quirk. His son, lacking the same kind of frame he had, didn't have enough strength behind those blows to make the kind of damage needed to put Midoriya down. Shoto was distinctly the better hand-to-hand fighter as they were, landing far more hits than Midoriya was. But he just couldn't manage the raw strength needed to put down the stronger and clearly more resilient opponent. The winner and the first of our finalists, Izuku Midoriya. Midnight declared as the audience gave a mixed response at best. Shoto was a crowd favorite given the boy's own power as well as Endeavor's status. Midoriya though, through both his quirk and his declaration, was far less popular amongst the heroes attending and scouting the event. Shoto. Oh Shoto. Fayumi fretted over him as he sat in the nurse's office for the stadium, his sister not all that happy at the large black eye he was sporting. Natsuo's comment of nice shiner had earned him a hard hit upside the head from their sister that honestly looked like it hurt more than Midoriya's punches. Hell hath no fury like a sister irritated. Don't worry Fayumi. Shoto tried his best reassuring smile even as Natsuo whimpered, it looks worse than it is. I'll be the judge of that young man. Recovery girl scolded, although it didn't have much heat. Maybe she was just glad there were no quirk-related injuries to treat from this fight. On another note. Natsuo whimpered, hoping to change the subject away from Shoto's black eye, you used your fire. What's that about? I thought you swore you never would. I've been doing a lot of thinking. Shoto admitted, looking at his siblings even as Recovery Girl checked over him, about the kind of hero I've been trying to be, about the kind of hero I want to be. About what could have been different if I'd used my flames at the USJ. About what would happen if someone got in the future because I didn't use everything I could. And then there's this. Rummaging around in his bag, he fished out an old journal. I found it in the attic. Casually, he tossed the old book to Fayumi who caught it and flipped to the inside cover, property of Shoto Todoroki. Natsuo read out confused. Our uncle the quirkless one. Shoto spoke about his apparent namesake, having been stunned that his father named him after someone weak like a quirkless person, no matter what affection there might have been. The book had talked a lot about what it was like growing up with our grandparents. Talked a lot about father. And it even had ideas that our uncle thought up for him, ideas he wanted the great hero Endeavor to be able to do, but they never got finished. I took the bits in here, our uncle's idea of this Hinokami Kagura, and I'm making it my own. Being a hero my way. Ayumi's proud smile made the foregoing of his pledge worth it. Izuku. They said in a serious line, Izuku stared down at the ring. In the fist round, Bakugo had fought Uraraka and had clearly enjoyed getting to battle and beat someone Izuku was close to. Last round, Shinso had actually managed to hurt Bakugo. Breaking the bomber's nose and giving him a cup check to end all cup checks as Mina had put it, leaving Bakugo livid and still wanting more combat, the blonde's anger only made worse upon noting how Shinso had joined Izuku's circle. Now Bakugo was going to be fighting Ryiko. I don't like this. Tokage frowned as she watched the two fighters approaching the ring, that Pomeranian jackass looks out for blood. He is out for blood. Izuku scowled, fingers turning wide as he clutched the armrests of his chair, and I don't know if Ryiko can win. I've never seen her be able to move fire with her quirk before, and while she can make shockwaves, I don't think they'll be as strong as his. Her chance, her only chance, is to knock him out of the ring before he can do anything. Begin. Midnight shouted as Ryiko lashed out with her quirk, trying to throw Bakugo from the ring. The blonde bastard had been expecting it through, throwing explosions out behind him to push himself forward and resist the force trying to shove him back. His quirk, already stronger than the previous rounds thanks to the worked-up sweat, got him closer and closer until he was right on top of Ryiko. Bakugo's savage grin sent a chill down Izuku's spine just before it first crashed into Ryiko's face, sending her hard against the ground. He didn't use his explosions. Mina was stunned, biting her nails nervously as they saw Ryiko work to get up, the punch to her head dazing her. He doesn't want to end this too fast. Izuku snarled, feeling his blood boil, feeling his rage, demanding he go in there and stop the fight to deal with Bakugo himself. But he didn't. Izuku stayed in his seat, praying for Ryiko to make a comeback, to do something, as Bakugo battered her around until Midnight had enough and called the fight, a bruised and half-conscious telekinetic, being carried off to Recovery Girl for treatment. Midoriya. Kirishima growled. Izuku's friends were just as livid as he was at the treatment Ryiko had undergone. At least when Izuku and Todoroki had fought without quirks, it was to show respect and still let a shaken Todoroki put in a good showing, not to draw out and cause pain, break him. Trust me. Izuku's voice deepened as he growled, his quirk boiling inside him. I plan to. He'd had to sit in his damn chair and watch what had just happened, and he hated himself for it. And so yeah, next chapter is the finals of the tournament. Izuku vs Bakugo plus what comes after. We've got the Stein arc coming up after that, and I can't wait to get to who Izuku's going to do his internship with. Sorry about this chapter's length, next one will be longer, but there's nothing else I felt I could add without it coming across as forced or padding. Chapter 27. And hey, to address a review I got on the last chapter. When I put Stein, I did mean Stain, that's how I first saw it spelled and honestly thought that was how it was supposed to be. Given how weird characters can be in an anime, I didn't think anything of it. It will be fixed going forward. Aizawa. Midnight's been alerted to be ready to intervene the moment things get out of hand. Shoto grunted as he stepped back into the announcer booth. He'd used the break between the semis and the finals to make sure those by the arena were ready to keep things under control. And the crowd? Kansas asked, clenching and unclenching his fists, a nervous tick the blood hero had never managed to get rid of. Some took it as Bakugo deeming Yanagi not worth his explosions and holding back because of it. Others took it as him having fun hurting someone after an embarrassing fight last round. Shoto sighed, running a tired hand down his face. Either way, I've also been keeping track of the official requests being sent in already by pros watching. Todoroki has the most, but Bakugo actually has a nice chunk too. A few names stood out though, mainly ones who don't care about a bad attitude or ones who have very rigid views on what a hero should or shouldn't be. Best Jeanist sent requests for both Bakugo and Midoriya. Oh boy. Hisashi pinched the bridge of his nose, this will be interesting. Noting something moving in the tunnels, Shoto took his seat as the fighters moved to the arena. Bakugo and Midoriya were both glaring at each other. The aura was palpable as they got onto the stage. I'm going to show the world for the fucking faker you are, you damn deku. Bakugo snarled, the mix picking up his words as he glared, even with whatever trigger you took you're no match for me. Trigger? Midoriya gave a dark chuckle, eyes dancing with rage, despite the faux mirth in his tone. No Kaken, the only trigger around is in that deluded little mind of yours. As Midoriya spoke, inflection put on a childish nickname Shoto hadn't heard before. The erasure hero hoped the green-haired student wasn't about to shoot himself in the foot on international television. They'd already have enough of a PR nightmare dealing with Bakugo. No, my dear Frankenstein. I'm merely the monster you created. At that, Midoriya transformed with a roar as the match began. Izuku. Letting out a roar, Izuku threw a heavy punch at Bakugo, who used his explosions to dodge to the side, Izuku's fist cracking the concrete arena floor. Die. Bakugo yelled, firing a point-blank explosion that covered Izuku's face and chest. Is that the best you can do? Izuku waved a gray-skinned arm to dispel the smoke, showing the only thing damaged had been his shirt, which was not burnt away. Face it, Bakugo, you're outmatched. Fuck off. Bakugo snarled, firing more explosions, one after another as Izuku stalked towards him. Years of being hit by the bastard's quirk, years of feeling the burn of explosions on his skin in his untransformed state. Burnt and healed, burnt and healed, burnt and healed. Repeatedly adapting but never knowing it until the true nature of his gift was revealed. Now though. Now Bakugo couldn't even singe his skin with the blasts he was releasing so far in the fight. Make me. Izuku glared back, managing to land a backhand, even if Bakugo dodged enough for it to only clip him. Still sent the bomber flying, and only the blonde's own impressive reflexes saved him from a ring out, the bomber shooting away to avoid Izuku's follow-up kick that had attempted to punt the bastard from the ring. Stop looking down on me. Bakugo snarled, adjusting the position of his hands to make more of a flashbang than an actual demolition. Blinking spots, Izuku staggered back a step, making it look like he was more blinded than he actually was. Bakugo barely had the chance to see Izuku's face go from blind confusion to vicious smirk before he lashed out, a fist as big as Bakugo's torso slamming into the Mad Bomber, before his own fist lashed out and grabbed Bakugo's ankle, slamming the one who'd hurt Ryiko into the floor. "Stop acting above everything." Izuku roared back, noting Bakugo clutching injured ribs, the blonde seemingly having figured out his base power output wasn't enough to get through Izuku's defenses. "You're nothing but a drugged-up cheating pebble." Bakugo seethed, "And I'll crush you like the bug you are." As Bakugo shot skyward and looked like he was getting ready to spin, Izuku noted Midnight and Cementus reacting to their earpieces out of the corner of his eye. Before they could do anything, Bakugo shot down, his usual manic grin on his face, Hotzer impact. Massive concrete walls started rising up to shield the audience as Bakugo slammed down, releasing the biggest explosion Izuku had ever seen him do. Izuku grit his teeth, feeling his skin actually start to burn from the powerful blast, it more than any other he'd suffered before but not enough to take him out of the fight. Rushing forward, lashing out with his arm once he hit the still recovering Bakugo, sending the bomber flying into the boundary walls and into unconsciousness. The sight was what the audience and judges saw as the walls started coming down, higher up cameras having projected what was going on inside the ring onto the jumbo screen. "And we have our first-year champion," Midnight declared as the medical bots came to take the beaten Bakugo away. Izawa. Standing by Namuri and Kansas, Shoto watched as the winners' podiums were raised from the ground. On the shortest one, he saw Todoroki helping an exhausted-looking Yanagi keep her balance, the two looking proud of their accomplishment. On the second tier, he saw Bakugo who kept switching between glaring at Midoriya and the floor. After the fight, and once he'd woke up in Recovery Girl's office, Bakugo had tried protesting about trigger used to the professors there, that Midoriya's win shouldn't count. He and the others had shut the boy down firmly, stating that every student was checked for signs of trigger, whether taken willingly or unknowingly drugged by someone wanting to affect gambling odds. He wasn't sure if Bakugo believed them or not. Finally, Midoriya stood tall on the tallest plinth, thankfully wearing a new shirt. Midoriya stood tall, looking somewhat stunned at it all, as if the victory was only just hitting the boy. "And here are our champions, everyone," Namuri called as those in the stands cheered, "and to present these victors with their medals, we have the one, the only, All Might." At the shout, the giant blonde oaf landed with a boom, having fallen from where he jumped. "I am here." All Might did one of his signature poses as the crowd started cheering louder. He'd have to have words with the man about not taking away the moment of victory from students in the future. Reaching into his pocket, All Might withdrew 2 bronze medals, "For you young Todoroki, young Yanagi. You both worked exceptionally hard to get where you were. You should be most proud of yourself, and I look forward to seeing where your futures take you." As he spoke, the giant man placed the medals around each of their necks. "Thank you, sir," Todoroki said, voice soft and nod hesitant. "I am most grateful for your kind words, Professor." Yanagi gave a nod of her own. "I shall endeavor to meet and surpass the expectations placed upon me by my teachers and myself." Next, young Bakugo All Might pulled out a silver medal that the blonde boy glared at like it was an insult. "I don't want that damn thing," Bakugo snarled, taking a step back away from the medal, even as All Might tried placing it around the protesting boy's neck. "Nothing matters but first place. If it ain't gold, it ain't worth shit. Then think of this as a battle wound to drive you to do better." All Might finally managed to force it on the boy, his advice surprisingly good, and one Shoto hoped would get through the stubborn boy's thick skull. "And finally, our champion." All Might approached Midoriya. "You made quite the statement at the start of all this, young man. I know many will not agree with it, many will not approve of you rocking the boat, but stick to your morals. Continue being a hero that the Water Hose duo can be proud of." "Believe me, sir, I will be," Midoriya swore as he allowed the gold medal to be placed on his neck. As he did so, Shoto noted that Todoroki had had the loudest cheers so far of the 4 champions. "But we aren't done yet." Shoto's voice rang clear through the stadium, having already gotten the approval of 3 of the 4 victors to allow another to share in their moment of triumph. Hitachi Shinso. The confused boy was pushed by the other students on the field watching to step forward. "There is currently an opening in the hero course. You have proved yourself here today, so we make this offer here and now. Do you wish to be a hero? Would you join Class 1A? The boy seemed stunned at actually getting the offer he craved. The friends the purple-haired brainwasher had started to make from both hero courses, cheering the loudest, which seemed to spur the boy into action. "Since I will be a hero. All for one." Hearing the television shut off as the sports festival finally drew to a close, All for One focused on his pupil. "Tamura, there is much you do not yet know. Much you are not yet ready to know. But I suppose now is a suitable time for you to learn. I have other allies besides yourself, Kurogiri, and the good doctor. Others I have trained and let loose upon the world yet still remain loyal to me. I shall have them come here, along with a couple independent contractors. I know of 2 individuals who would be best suited to working to deal with this young Midoriya should he become a problem. And given his quirk, I am certain he would do so. They would take a couple days to arrive, a week at most, but soon all 5 rings would be in Japan. He looked forward to seeing where this went. And that wraps up the sports festival. Next chapter we start setting up work studies, mentors, and stain. I have some good stuff planned and I'm excited to get to it. Chapter 28. Izuku. Welcome back. Aizawa nodded to the gathered class, to those here, well done in the sports festival. Many of Izuku's classmates straightened proudly at that, but things are only going to get harder from here. Tapping a button, the board started showing names and projected statistics. Normally this doesn't happen till your second year, but Nezu has decided to speed things up. Starting next week all of you will be spending a week interning with various hero agencies. The statistics on the board are the offers sent in by heroes wanting to work with you. Don't be worried if you don't have an offer, the school has 40 agencies willing to take first years regardless of offers. Looking at the board, Izuku saw that Todoroki had the most offers at 4,123. What's with those numbers though? Kaminari asked confused, I mean, Midoriya won, so shouldn't he have the most offers? A glance at the chart showed that Izuku had a grand total of 8 offers. It's a sad fact that many offers Todoroki received were likely from people wanting just his raw power, a connection to Endeavor, or both. Aizawa sighed, clearly not happy about the topic, but more than that many heroes, unfortunately, tend to be very closed-minded. Midoriya, your pledge at the festival paired with your appearance when you transform would have made things harder for yourself. Still, I'm positive you'll overcome it. The promise of faith made Izuku feel a surge of determination. How long do we have to decide? Tokoyami asked warily, noting the number of offers he had in the hundreds. You have till the end of the day on Wednesday to get your choices sent in. Aizawa answered, Thursday and Friday will be spent preparing you for those internships. I'm about to give you your offer lists to begin going through. You may go to the cafeteria to meet with any friends from 1B to compare and consider your choices. Shinso, you're the exception. Aizawa looked at the class's newest member, given that you only just joined you'll be spending the internship week with me getting caught up to speed. Understood. Shinso nodded, clearly determined to catch up with the rest of them. As for the rest of you, come collect your offer lists. Aizawa tapped the stacks, this week is free training to prepare for the internships and work on any issues you may have found during the sports festival. The exception is going to be after lunch. What happens after lunch? Tsu tilted her head confused. You'll be picking your hero names. Aizawa stated firmly as the class got excited, picking up their offers and heading to the cafeteria, hoping to meet up with the rest of the group from 1B. Uo. Tokage landed in a seat beside Kirishima with a thud, you guys got your offers. So, who got the most? Was it Midoriya? Todoroki got 4,123. Izuku answered as he nervously eyed his small stack. I got 8. What? Tokage looked outraged, but Bakugo got over 3,000. You're kidding. Mina gaped indignantly, but he's a jackass. Many heroes don't care. Midoriya scowled, only wanting someone powerful and flashy to boost their own rankings. They also prefer those who look human, or at least less scary. Think about it, Ryukyu is arguably stronger than Mirko, but Mirko looks more human and, as fucked up as it is more easily fetishized. That's why Mirko is ranked higher. The polls are primarily based around popularity, it's why Endeavor is still number 2, despite having solved far more cases than All Might has in the past few years. That's messed up. Kirishima and Tetsutetsu scowled even as Ryiko was glaring at Izuku's stack of offers, as if her glare could make more manifest from the ether. So, who did make you an offer? Hagakure decided to try and get the conversation to focus on something more positive. I don't know. Izuku tilted his head as he opened his folder, pulling out the first one and freezing the water hose duo. His voice wavered slightly, noting that they'd sent in the request a day that the term began, before they went against the villain Muscular. I'm sure they'd be proud of you winning the festival. Ryiko kept her words simple, even as she gave his hand a squeeze, Izuku giving her a grateful smile. Next best genist. Izuku blinked in surprise at the offer, that's a no. What, why? Yayoi Rozu tilted her head confused, he's one of the highest ranked heroes in Japan. He also tends to have very rigid views on heroism. Izuku shook his head, remembering interviews where people ask his opinions on what a hero should be. He probably made the offer wanting to mold me into the same type of hero he is himself. Rather than let you be yourself. Kendo nodded. Exactly. Izuku went through the rest of the offers, seeing ones from Hawks, the Wild Pussycats, Fat Gum, Ryukyu, Sir Night Eye and Gang Orca. I get Fat Gum, Ryukyu, and Sir Night-Eye. Uraraka tilted her head, you said they were the mentors of the big three, And hadn't the group been more than a little jealous till they found out how often he got his ass beat in those training sessions, but what about the rest of them? I'm not sure about the wild pussycats. Izuku frowned as he worked to remember, I think they did a few team-ups with the water hose duo in the past. Maybe it's out of respect for them. Ox, I don't know, but I don't know what all he could teach me. His method of heroics is very speed-based thanks to his flight. But hey, Gang Orca included a note in his request. Izuku unfolded it even as his friends leaned in to snoop. The letter was rather simple, it simply stated that Gang Orca, though Izuku had a lot of potential, but many would be wary of him due to his appearance. Gang Orca, as the reigning title holder for hero who most looks like a villain, was used to this and would be able to help Izuku get used to dealing with it, find workarounds, and more. I think I'm going to go with Gang Orca. Izuku nodded as he read the letter again, he reached out because of me, not because I was already friends with their pupils, or to mold me into something else. Plus he does kinda have a point. Well, that's you sorted at least. Tokage gave Izuku a slap to the back, now let's figure out what the rest of us are going to do. Midori bro, we need your hero nerd knowledge. Kirishima and Tetsu pleaded in tandem, help us find good choices please. All for one. Young Tamura. All for one called the least experienced of his acolytes come. Kurogiri warped in the still sulking disintegrator, the others have already arrived. Tamura scowled darker at that, having not taken the news that he wasn't the only pupil well. Take your seat. He nodded to an empty chair, the other members of the 5 rings sitting in their own seats, their allies not currently at the meeting. So, who are these NPCs? Tamura gave a dark scowl at the various villains. They are my pupils, same as you Tamura. All for one's tone made the violent young man stiffen for a moment, but as for their names. There is 9, he nodded to the man who had requested the Midoriya boy's quirk, likely to overcome the cellular decay his own power caused Wolfram, the German-based villainous mercenary and thief overhaul. The local Yakuza who was an admitted genius when it came to quirks in chemical weapons, and finally Lex Luthor. The last one was admittedly an oddity amongst his ranks, a quirkless businessman based out of America. The man had in fact turned down an offered quirk for the simple fact that everyone always underestimated him. That and it gave him pleasure making his own weapons and gear to defeat those who had powers of their own. Master, you said that you had some contacts that would be useful in acquiring the Midoriya boy without drawing attention to us for now. 9 asked, always focused on the task at hand. Yes, I'd rather avoid letting the world know of our connection as of yet. All for one nodded to the only survivor of the experiments to transplant his quirk, not to mention if he can adapt as well as the information we acquired implies then all it would take would be a single failure to make any subsequent attempts that much more difficult. But your new grunts don't have that problem. A still jealous Tamura sulked. Snapping his fingers, 2 figures stepped into the light, meet a pair of old friends of mine. All for one smirked first as the scarecrow, whose quirk makes those he uses it on to suffer hallucinations based upon their fears. As there's no physical harm, only a mental aspect, then UA's adapter should be unable to grow resistant. Second is a friend of mine from the dawn of quirks, Lobo. Soup. The blue-skinned bruiser belched, oh, that tasted like lunch. And his aide. Overhaul looked at the rather unwashed Lobo skeptically, the man's aversion to germs shining through. His quirk is that he is immune to side effects. All for one had always found the man's quirk bemusing, but given the confused expressions of his acolytes, he supposed he would need to explain if he was thirsty and drank poison to quench his thirst. He would be unharmed because the intent was to quench thirst, dying of poison would be a side effect. He has done several jobs for me over the centuries and has been paid in weaponry or quirks, the loss of brain function being a side effect he is, therefore, immune to. All Might is growing weaker, if he hasn't chosen a successor now, he'll choose one soon. I have trained the 5 of you to take the remnants of my empire All Might shattered. We stand upon the precipice of change. Let us take that leap and fly. And there we go. Izuku's mentor will be Gang Orca. The recurring threats are Lobo, with various weapons to change up what he uses to stay effective, and a scarecrow, who's not a physical threat but a mental one. Next chapter starts the internships and will let you see Izuku's hero name. Say, things are gonna start picking up now. Chapter 29. AN2. Sorry about how long this update took to get out. I've been having some severe writer's block and decided to just put out what I had, rather than make the other chapters I wanted to add in. And to address some concerns about the acolytes shown last time, I wanted to point out a few things. Some of you commented that Overhaul shouldn't be one because his end goal is to erase quirks. But keep in mind he originally wanted to make the erasing drug, plus an antidote, as just a way to get money and influence for the Yakuza. Wanting to erase all quirks didn't come until later. So, this one, influenced earlier, would have some changes. Second, Scarecrow's quirks is causing hallucinations. It's not a gas like in DC Comics. All it does is cause you to hallucinate what you fear. That is something to overcome mentally, not a thing to adapt to. A much harder feat to achieve. Third, to those worried about Lobo being too easily adapted to. He's the brute muscle to pair with Scarecrow's mind games. All for one will give him what weapons he needs as he needs them, and Lobo is just a brute durable enough that AFO doesn't have to worry about him. And no, he doesn't have the Superman level of invulnerability in this. He's the MHA version of Lobo and is based more on his personality. Chapter 29. Izuku. Taking a deep breath, Izuku walked up the steps to Gang Orca's agency, the building giving off an aura of intimidation, much akin to the hero who ran it. Was wondering when you'd arrive. One of Gang Orca's sidekicks, wearing the full bodysuit they all donned, nodded to him from behind a desk. Boss has been looking forward to having you work with us this week. I'm glad for the offer. Izuku couldn't help his grin. He was a hero nerd in the office of one of the top 10 heroes of the country. He was riding on cloud 9 right now. Glad to hear it. Gang Orca's booming voice made Izuku jump as he spun around to see the hero himself returning from a patrol, more of the identically garbed sidekicks at his side. Come on, we can hit the training room and I'll go over our plan for the week there. Sir, yes sir. Izuku nodded, hurrying to go put on his, admittedly basic hero costume. The current costume he'd managed to get was designed to be simple and tactical, but unfortunately not all that eye-catching. Cargo pants, combat boots, and a simple shirt with a tactical vest, all designed around giving him range of movement and pockets for medical supplies to help anyone he comes across. So, that's your hero costume? Gang Orca inspected him as he joined the man in the training room, various sidekicks doing different exercises around them. My quirk offers all the defense I need, especially the more I use it. Izuku explained, so I didn't see much point in adding armor or anything. Pair that with the issues I've had getting a working prototype costume and the fact that I'll inevitably become more durable than any costume, and I didn't see much point in getting anything too fancy. His fighting style revolved around taking hits to give him the biggest openings to counter-strike. I'm guessing you've never heard of hero costumes made of your own hair? Gang Orca asked as Izuku blinked, having not heard of that. Not surprised, it's a more recent development and not one that needs to be used often. It allows a person's quirk that affects their body in unusual ways to keep up, for lack of a better word. That's how Togata's hero suit doesn't fall off. Izuku realized. Oh yeah, Night Eye's boy. Gang Orca nodded, I heard about him. We have the same support studio making our costumes, and they have a person whose quirk lets them manipulate hair. I'll have you taken there so they can get plenty to work with and have a proper hero costume created. We'll be swinging by there tomorrow morning, so be sure to think of any ideas you want them to add in, alright? Right. Izuku nodded before noting the phrasing, swing by. Did you have somewhere specific where you planned for us to go? Indeed. Gang Orca nodded, we'll be spending the week in Hosu. Izuku's eyes widened, fully aware of the recent events that had occurred in that city. Relax. Gang Orca chuckled at seeing Izuku's wide-eyed expression, we won't be going after the hero killer, the hero commission has a team dedicated to that task in point of fact. No, we'll just be picking up the slack there. Whenever the hero killer attacks, most of the pros in whatever area he targets tend to have one of three reactions. Either they bunker down and hide, thinking they're next, they clean up any problems in their act and pray he lets them live, or they double down on their work to try and handle the upsurge in crime. But so many heroes either hiding or walking on eggshells, other criminals think they have an easy shot at doing whatever they want. So, who's in charge of the hero killer hunt? Izuku nodded, calming down his worry now that he knew his mentor wasn't intending to drag him out to hunt down a serial killer. Officially or unofficially? Gang Orca snorted in dry bemusement. The commission asked Mirko to lead the hunt, but she doesn't play nice with others and refused to have help. She's still hunting him on her own though. Endeavor was asked, and he'll be in the Hosu area as well, but he doesn't want to be actively searching for the hero killer when he has a student intern as well, let alone his own kid. Izuku nodded, having spoken to Shoto, who said he'd be training with his father. His classmate's expression had been complicated, as if it was a test for himself as much as Endeavor, but why Izuku had no idea. So, the current official leaders of the hunt are Snatch and Crust. The reports from his surviving victims state that the hero killer tends to use bladed weapons, along with some sort of paralysis quirk. Given Crust shields and Snatch's body manipulation, they hope to get the upper hand. Right. Izuku nodded, relieved to know that there was such a plan in place. Now, for the week I'll be oscillating on what we do. Gang Orca continued, we'll be based out of a communal agency for the week, so when we aren't patrolling, I'll be having you work on your combat skills. Thanks to the report on your skills your homeroom teacher put together paired with what I saw at the sports festival, I'm aware of your ability at defense. Your form still needs refinement when it comes to the offense though, along with a few ideas I feel you need to work on to be safe. Now, I don't see your hero name on the file I got sent when you accepted this internship. Yeah, I had the acceptance submitted before names got finalized. Izuku admitted sheepishly, it took some arguing, but I convinced Midnight to allow me the name I wanted. Oh? Gang Orca sounded intrigued as he had Izuku start jogging around the gym to warm up, you have me curious. What's the name, and why would you have to argue for it? She thought it didn't sound heroic at first, or at least part of it. Izuku admitted, but she accepted my reasoning eventually. My homeroom teacher, Eraserhead, only gave one piece of advice to my class about picking our names. That a hero's name was meant to show the kind of hero they intend to be, the message they wish to send. So, I became the Doombringer hero. Dauntless, because I intend to doom any plans a villain makes. Anyone who wishes to hurt someone innocent, to make an orphan, a widow, or a widower, I will become their worst nightmare. Villains are the monsters of regular civilians, I intend to become a monster to the villains themselves. Never relenting in destroying what the villains have built. Hence the dauntless bit. Gang Orca nodded, his stride showing a casual ease that marked him as an experienced pro next to Izuku. It's a strong name, one that you'll have to work hard to live up to. Many will question it, many will question you. Are you ready for that? Like I said in my pledge, I don't care about being popular. I just care about doing the best I can to be a hero. Izuku nodded seriously, to save lives. Remember that boy. Gang Orca nodded, having Izuku transform to spar, you'll need that motivation in the years to come. Tamura Shigaraki. Snarling with rage, Tamura threw everything off his desk to the ground, the sound likely reaching the bar down below, but he knew Kurogiri would do nothing. No, the main issue was those damned acolytes who were trying to steal a master from him. He was the one Master chose. He was the one Master saved. Master had told him before to destroy whatever he hated, but now he was being told he wasn't allowed to destroy that cheating green-haired bastard. It's not fair. Tamura snarled, heaving violent angry breaths, why does Master listen to them over me? One of them didn't even have a quirk, was just some American businessman. I need to prove myself to him. Tamura panted, not caring that he was talking to himself at this point, I need to show that I'm the main character and they're just a bunch of worthless NPCs. He started rapidly going through his phone's news feed, frantically looking for a target. Something he could do to prove to his master why he didn't need those other four. Hero killer. He paused as he came across the article of the man who'd killed or crippled well over a dozen heroes by this point. Yeez. Tamura's dry cracked lips split into a grin that would likely horrify anyone had they been there to see it, that's perfect. With him in the League of Villains our name will be feared. Master will see he doesn't need those others. I could even send this assassin after All Might. It's perfect. Tamura cackled happily, Hosu, here I come. Chapter 30. And? Sorry about slow updates everyone. Writer's block plus an unrelenting amount of insomnia has made it hard to do anything recently. I'm working on pushing through it though. And 2. I wanted to address some concerns I noticed in the reviews recently. To those worried this is just a rehash of canon with a different quirk, don't worry, changes are coming. Some stories I veer away from canon right off the bat, other times I let the changes domino. This is a domino story. And to those wondering if this is a crossover, it isn't. The DC characters aren't exact one-to-one paralogues, they're inspired by the powers and or personalities of the comic book characters to give more things to use for this fic. Izuku. Alright kid, welcome to Hosu. Gang Orca smirked as they got off the train in full uniform. Gang Orca was in his usual attire, but had given a few pieces of gear from his standard sidekick kit to complement what Izuku had until the new commissioned uniform could be completed. This place feels tense. Izuku noted, seeing how most of the civilians on the street were moving quickly, eyes flitting down every dark alley as if terrified something would drag them screaming into the shadows. I'm guessing you've never left your hometown. Gang Orca shook his head, things tend to be pretty calm around you, kid. Not as many villains are willing to try anything that close to a major hero academy, given the number of hero teachers, provisionally licensed students, and the regular heroes of the city. Not saying it doesn't happen, you'd know that more than anyone, but the average civilian there is used to things being handled and secured quickly. Hosu doesn't have that. Add a dead hero from a serial killer onto things, and you get a powder keg waiting to go off. Izuku nodded, hastily writing what his mentor stated in one of his journals as they walked, wanting to take notes to study later and to share with his friends. Got it. Izuku nodded as he finished writing and tucked the journal away. Glad to see you're so eager. Gang Orca snorted amused, anyway, we might run into some of your classmates today. I know Endeavor is in the area with his son, and one of your classmates is working with a local hero. I think the kid put his hero name down as Tenya. What? Izuku's head snapped towards his mentor. They let him come here. What's the issue? Gang Orca demanded, eyes narrowed as the pro recognized something was very wrong by Izuku's tone. My classmate Tenya is Tenya Ida, Ingenium's little brother. Izuku may not like Ida, but he didn't want to let the moron get killed by Stain or ruin his life by going on a revenge quest. Damn it all. Gang Orca pinched the bridge of his nose. They've either gotten a backup plan in place to help the kid through whatever issues he has, or they overlook things in the rush. Either way, the only thing we can do here is keep an eye out ourselves. Nothing against the law about the kid taking his internship here, and for all we know he just wants to get closure by seeing where the attack happened or something. Maybe show the citizens that a member of that pro family is still doing good work. Yeah, let's hope that's it. Izuku nodded, not believing it for a second. Now come on kid, I want to get a patrol in before we head to the communal headquarters we'll be working out of. Gang Orca slapped him on the back. Let's see how you handle interacting with people on the streets. Nezu. Good to see you all again. Nezu smiled happily as he stirred his tea, nodding to those in his office. I felt it prudent to take the chance to speak while the students were all away on their various internships. Now that we've seen the candidates perform in their sports festivals, has there been any change to the considerations? I believe I've narrowed it down to 2 choices. All Might nodded, seeming quite pleased with himself. The fifth would be young Mirio. He's strong already, as the apprentice of Mirai here, so we know he's trustworthy on the matter and has quite the heroic spirit as I've come to see. I knew you'd see the value in Mirio. Night-Eye preened at the, to him all but guaranteed, possibility of his apprentice inheriting one for all. And the second? Gran Torino questioned, the old speedster impatient and wanting to get things back on track. Miss Yanagi. All Might nodded, her quirk would become something truly impressive when boosted by one for all. Added to that she has an impressive intellect and a growing support network of promising heroes already forming around her to help become pillars in their own right. And Mirio doesn't. Night-Eye raised an eyebrow. He has his friends in his year and is even forming a bond with the first-year group. All Might conceded, but they seem more like work-alone heroes who are close friends and don't mind teaming up. The first-year group has a greater team synergy that I've seen. Did you have anything in mind for the final decision? Nezu asked, working to restrain his eagerness by sipping tea. 2 powerful young students, he wasn't sure who he wanted to get the quirk more. What end result he was the most curious about. The semester exams before the summer training camps. All Might set down a proposed plan. You're already planning to have the students fight upper year students for the first and second years, while the more promising second years and the third years will fight heroes, yes? I propose that we tailor the exams for these 2 to fully test which one is best to receive one for all. Then, we can transfer the quirk and use the training camp to begin their progress with it. The idea of an intense week-long session of doing nothing but pushing one's quirk over the limit would be a plausible way to explain any sort of quirk awakening. A logical decision, I suppose. Aizawa relented with a sigh. We'll have to make the tests for individuals rather than pairs like we've been talking about, but it's still doable. And they'll both need opponents who can push them to their limits or beyond. I'm aware. I was going to suggest young Hato to go against young Yanagi. All Might nodded. We haven't seen Yanagi's telekinesis work on pure energy like Miss Hato's waves, so that will be a more challenging opponent. As for Mirio, I'd suggest having him go against Ragdoll or Miss Joke. Mirio could overpower them easily. Night-Eye scoffed. Yes, physically. But their quirks are more mental-based. Mirio is already a jockster at heart, so that would give more for Miss Joke's quirk to latch onto. It'll be difficult to do the rapid thoughts and mental calculations his quirk needs to be utilized effectively if he's barely able to breathe from laughing. Ragdoll on the other hand is a capable fighter in her own right, she has to be given her ranking, but no matter what Mirio does, she'd be able to find him with her quirk and find weaknesses to exploit. It would test how well he handles opponents who he can't just brute force through. That's not All Might. Aizawa gripped his scarf, his suggestions are actually good. I try to become a better teacher, and this is what happens. All Might sighed as Aizawa, Recovery Girl, and Gran Torino all eyed him suspiciously. I'll consider your suggestions. Nezu smiled merrily, enjoying the chaos that always followed All Might around. The man was so useful for staving off boredom. Izuku? Ooh. Izuku groaned as he collapsed into the bedroom he'd be using at the communal office. Todoroki, his roommate while here, already settled in. Long day? The dual quirk user asked hesitantly. Long day. Izuku groaned into his pillow before getting up. I never realized how exhausting it would be to interact with the different people I'd meet on patrols. Some were nice, some were scared of me because of how I look when I transform. Some wanted an autograph. Others were angry that they'd lost money betting on people I beat in the tournament and chewed me out for it. Seriously? Todoroki raised a skeptical eyebrow. One of them was apparently a fanboy of your dad's and didn't like the fact that you weren't the gold medal winner. Izuku nodded before tossing his journal over here. I took notes on lessons I got from Gang Orchid today. Figured we could compare and find what works from both our mentors. That makes sense. Todoroki nodded, intrigued by the idea. Do you have an empty journal? A lazy toss let it land with a slap on Todoroki's bed. Thank you. The dual-colored hero in training started happily writing down what he'd been taught that day. We should message the others on the group chat to see if they'll do the same. Yeah. Izuku rolled his neck, perking up at the thought of talking to his friends. I'm curious as to what Ryiko's doing with her internship. Ryiko? Todoroki questioned, head tilted in confusion as Izuku felt his own face turn beet red. Slamming his face back down onto the bed with a groan, he ignored Todoroki's questions on what was going on. Kurogiri. Polishing yet another unused glass, Kurogiri watched the tense standoff taking place in the bar. He knew that this was a bad idea, but could not go against Master Tamura's wishes. Even still, he could be cautious, he could plan, and he could have an escape ready to use as needed. Tell me. The raspy voice of Stain, the hero killer, filled the bar and continued to heighten Kurogiri's stress with every moment the man spent here reeking of blood. Why should I bother following you? What is it you seek? What are your convictions? Chapter 31. And one of my readers recently pointed out that I have 99 stories on my profile and asked what I would do for big number 100. And I thought, you know what, why not? This post has the rest of the poll winners from the current poll group. I'm putting up a new poll with candidates from my major fandoms. Vote on which one you want. Poll lasts a week, and when I start the next poll after that week, I'll post a big number 100 winner. And 2. Addressing some concerns where people thought that Gang Orchid didn't do enough. He can't force Ida to leave, he doesn't have that kind of authority. I already established that the pro heroes doing the mentorships got files on the students going there, so Manuel would already know about Ida being Ingenium's brother. That said, he also made it clear he and his army of sidekicks, since the show distinctly shows him having a lot of them, are going to be doing what they can to keep an eye on Ida and that situation. There's also those thinking I'm trying to use a cheap trick to keep Mirio from getting Ofa. I'm not, I'm just acknowledging that Miss Joke and Ragdoll would be good pros to test him. Yes, he can fight while deaf and dumb, but it's also established that he makes those calculations he needs before he activates his quirk. With Miss Joke, she'd be using her quirk to drive air from his lungs, making it hard to concentrate and therefore do those calculations, let alone hold his breath, that he needs to use his quirk effectively since he can't breathe while down there. Ragdoll is a good enough hero to hold her own in combat, and her quirk would literally let her know where Mirio was and weaknesses or openings to exploit. The students are supposed to be given opponents who are difficult to defeat or have some sort of counter to them. Mirio isn't unbeatable, despite what some of you seem insistent on. Finally, about those saying that Ofa backlash would hurt Ryiko because of what's shown in later manga chapters and the movie. I haven't seen anything in the show that shows that and haven't read the manga, but I also noted that when it broke Bakugo's arm in the movie it was when he threw a punch, not when he used his emitter quirk. And 3. One last thing. There are more things going on in the manga that haven't happened in the anime yet and more characters. I want to read the manga to catch up and make my stories better for all of you, but I don't want to read the earlier chapters if they're going to be the exact same stuff that was in the show. Can you guys let me know in the reviews how much was changed in adapting from manga to anime? Like, would I be severely confused, left out, or could I pick up right where the dubbed anime left off? That said, what chapter of the anime is that? I'd appreciate the help. Kurogiri. Pathetic. Stain's raspy voice scoffed, Kurogiri unable to not listen intently even as his body ached from the stab wound the serial killer had used to paralyze him. You lack conviction. Stain twisted the knife in Tamura's shoulder. You lack desire. You lack purpose. You seek me to join your crumbling little league, this monument to your own petty dream. Your childish tantrum. It is why you shall fail. It is why you must be purged. Stain worked to cut into Tamura's neck, only for the master's pale hand to lash out, grasping the blade, even as fresh blood poured down the rapidly rusting steel. Conviction. Tamura grit his teeth, working to force his body up even with the blade pinning him to the floor. I might not have anything as lofty as that. But I do have a desire. Tamura's eyes were wide, manic with bloodlust to kill All Might. If the world wants to worship trash like him, then this isn't a world that deserves to exist. I'll tear it down, brick by brick if I have to. Tamura swung at Stain, who easily dodged the strike. As he watched, Kurogiri grit his teeth, trying to force his body to move. Young master. Your arm. Yeah. Tamura waved him off uncaring. I'd just gotten back to full after those damned heroes shot me, and now this. You should be more careful with knives, Stain. We don't exactly have a dedicated healer in our party yet. HMPH, so you do have that seed of desire. Stain, for whatever reason, relaxed. The man put his remaining blade away. It's warped, it's abnormal, but it is there. How will it bloom, I wonder? First you try to kill me, now you spout philosophy. Tamura sneered in disgust. I was testing you. Stain's calmness unnerved Kurogiri. The man had no fear of death or injury. It was unnatural. People always show their true selves when closest to death. But now we are at an impasse. While our goals fundamentally oppose one another, we do both agree that society, hero society, needs to be changed. Through bloody force if necessary. Oh, shut up already. Tamura was clutching his bleeding shoulder and scratching his neck, the rough grating sound filling the bar. You already made it clear you wanted me purged, didn't you? I can't stand people like you who talk and talk when nobody cares, just wanting to hear the sound of your own damn voice. Young master, please reconsider. Kurogiri begged, this man is powerful, he would be a tremendous asset to the league if you. No. That one word from Stain was enough to make Kurogiri snap his mouth shut, even if it was spoken calmly, voice unraised. My business here is done. I shall let you live for now. I am curious to see how your seed of conviction will bloom. If need be, I shall return, but now I am still needed in Hosu. There are more false heroes that must be purged. Kurogiri shuddered even as he felt control of his body return. The man's insane eyes and the unnaturally long and thick tongue made his stomach turn just to witness. Izuku. Hey Shoto. Izuku nodded to his roommate as he returned from yet another day of patrols, his notebook heavy with observations and lessons from his new mentor. Hello Midoriya. Todoroki nodded, putting away his own journal. I mentioned your suggestion to my father. Izuku noted that his classmate was still uncertain about how best to handle things with the man, and he approved of the idea. As he spoke, the elementalist tossed over a journal this one filled with notes about how to use a flame quirk, but also about hero work in general. Endeavor's personal habits, philosophies, and training methods. Thanks Todoroki. Izuku grinned as he pulled up his phone to check the group chat. Izuku. Hey guys, just got done with patrols for the day. Todoroki. Indeed. We are currently comparing notes from what our mentors have imparted to us. Hagakure. Ugh, you're so stiff Todoroki. You need to lighten up. By the way Midoriya, thanks for recommending Uwabami. She's been great in helping me figure out how I'm going to market myself as a pro despite being, well, unseen. And she's even helping me figure out my light flash thingy I did at the sports festival. Apparently it's light refraction, and given how often she helps with the lighting of her own commercials, she's been a big help. She thinks I might be able to turn it into a signal beam or maybe even a laser attack if I train it enough. Ashido. Gak. TLDR Hagakure. Hagakure. Midoriya is king of mentor suggestions. And I might get laser beams. Ashido. Sweet idiot. Also, why aren't we using nicknames on this chat? I demand a swanky title. Ashido has changed their name to Acid Queen. Acid Queen. Their hero names are much better. Hagakure has changed their name to Prisma. Kirishima has changed their name to Red Riot. Tetsutetsu has changed their name to Real Steel. Tokage has changed their name to Lizardi. Uraraka has changed their name to Uravity. Yaoi Rozu has changed their name to Creati. Kendo has changed their name to Battle Fist. Inagi has changed their name to Emily. Midoriya. Wow, you guys are really eager for nicknames on this, aren't you? Shinso has changed their name to Makinche. Midoriya. Even you Shinso. Todoroki has changed their name to Freezerburn. Midoriya. Freezerburn. I felt left out. Midoriya. Sigh if you can't beat him, join him. Midoriya has changed their name to Dauntless. Prisma. Yae. Acid Queen. Yae. Lizardi. Yae. Uravity. And don't deny it Midoriya, you know you want to show off your hero name. Dauntless. I admit nothing. Freezerburn. By drawing attention to you not wanting to answer, does that not just admit everything? Lizardi. Oh you sweet innocent summer child. Freezerburn. I am confused. Real Steel. Yeah, she tends to do that. Lizardi. L. Lizardi. Freezerburn. I am still confused. Real Steel. She made an emoji of you being flipped off. Freezerburn. Fascinating. I believe my brother Natsuo would like this. Real Steel. It's spreading. Tokage no. Lizardi. Tokage yes. Emily. Kakuna and Metapod aren't using those nicknames though. Red Riot. Let those memes die. Real Steel. Seconded. Battle Fist. Yanagi, it wouldn't make sense for only two of them to have nicknames on here that aren't hero names. What would you call Todoroki for example? Dauntless. Baked Alaska. J. Red Right. Real Steel. Battle Fist. Creati. Prisma. Acid Queen. Lizardi. Gravity. Emily. That actually makes sense. Freezer Burn. Ah, yes. Because I have ice and fire while Baked Alaska is ice cream that gets fried. I see where such a nickname would come from. Lizardi. Ooh, you're killing me here Todoroki. Midoriya, we need to get medical help to our friend. Todoroki's head snapped up at that text. It was a joke. Izuku rushed over, managed to lower Todoroki's phone, just a figure of speech. She's messing with you, not being literal. He assured. Lizardi. Ooh, you guys there? Dauntless. I had to convince Todoroki that you weren't in need of medical assistance. Lizardi. You know, I'm starting to think you should have done your internship with Miss Joke. You can still train with your dad on your off time, but she can help you figure out what a sense of humor is. Dauntless. Well, he only recently started using his fire again, so that's more urgent to get a lock on now. But she might be good for a future internship. She's also good with stealth if she works underground heroic work like takedowns while being dressed as brightly as she is. Freezer Burn. I apologize, but I just realized I'm not sure who the rest of you are currently interning with. Lizardi. You're all good my dude. And I'm with the dragon heroine Ryiko. She and Najire from the big three are helping me with my flight. Plus, she might not be a dinosaur, but a dragon is the next best thing. Real Steel. Still miffed Godzilla didn't send you a request huh? Lizardi. You can prove nothing. Red Right. Well, my man Tetsu and I are both interning with Fourth Kind. He's all kinds of manly. Real Steel. Yeah. Acid Queen. I went with Backdraft. He's been really helpful helping me figure out how to use my acid in a better stream. He's even been helping me design some support gear. J. Well, you know I'm working with Aizawa to catch up to you. But I did find out that apparently Odd Eye was interested in having me intern and might send a work-study request once we get to that point. Gravity. I'm studying with Gunhead. His dojo is amazing and he's so much fun to talk to. Emily. Captain Celebrity. He's surprisingly dorky. Apparently, the attitude he shows in public is him trying to make people smile and relax, much like how All Might does. Dauntless. Yeah, he has a history of misreading people and being a playboy. Something he thankfully stopped after his kid was born a few years ago. But he's also one of the most powerful telekinetics on the planet, given his gives him flight, super strength, and near invulnerability. Creati. I went with Fat Gum. He's been a wonderful host and taught me a lot about handling replenishing my body's lipids quickly on the job, given both our quirks use them. Battle Fist. Yoroi Musha is all kinds of intense, but has really helped me improve my form and combat style. Emily. But what are you learning Izuku? Todoroki. Izuku felt himself blush as he read that she put his first name, brain shooting off a mile a minute, as he wondered if it was intentional, if it was a typo. What the others would think. If he should start using her first name in the chat. It was only after his phone buzzed several times did he think to check back in to see what he missed. Acid Queen. Ooh. Izuku. You holding out on us girl. Lizardi. Deets. I needs M. Real Steel. Oh, here we go. Freezer Burn. Midoriya called her Ryiko last night. Is this not normal? Gravity. I'm pretty sure I can hear Mina squeeing from here. J. I'm pretty sure all of Japan heard that. Acid Queen. You guys are mean. Freezer Burn. I am confused again. Lizardi. Alright lovebirds, speak up. Dauntless has left the group chat. Emily has left the group chat. Chapter 32. And one of my readers recently pointed out that I have 99 stories on my profile and asked what I would do for big number 100. And I thought, you know what, why not? This post has the rest of the poll winners from the current poll group. I'm putting up a new poll with candidates from my major fandoms. Vote on which one you want poll lasts a week and when I start the next poll after that week, I'll post a big number 100 winner. And 2. I've noticed a lot of people having different thoughts on what could or could not be adapted to with Izuku's quirk, so I'm putting in an at the bottom of the chapter to go over how it works in more detail to avoid further confusion. Izuku. Fire. Smoke. Screaming. That was all Izuku could find in Hosu as he and Gang Orca ran through the streets, the other Orca sidekicks helping deal with the mayhem. Not only were several Noma rampaging, but other local villains had taken the opportunity to join in the chaos, every hero doing what they could to try end the chaos. Currently, Izuku was helping a sidekick restrain a local thug with a blade creation quirk who tried to stab a fleeing civilians. You, alright Dauntless Gang Orca shouted, the powerful hero landing a hard blow against a Nomo who let out a screech. For now. Izuku grunted, pulling out his own cement gun. Gang Orca had been training him on how to use, hitting the flying Nomu at the joint of the wings as it stalled in the air, letting the pro land a hard blow. Good. Orca nodded, landing a killing blow on the Nomu, the Hero Commission, having given standing orders that the biological weapons be killed if encountered, given the nature of the monstrosities. Izuku trailed off, noting the trail of fresh blood leading into an alley. I think there's someone injured that way. Damn it all. Orca grunted, bracing himself as a thug with a stone body quirk charged him. Kid, you have permission to use your quirk as needed. Find whoever's hurt and get them out of there. Use the flares if you need backup. Right. Izuku nodded, pushing down the giddy feeling at the trust his mentor was showing. Now was not the time for that. Shooting off, Izuku charged into the alleys, following the blood as the other sidekicks remained to fight the Nomu and thugs while escorting civilians. The city was all hands on deck, so this was a trial by fire. Goodbye, child. Hearing a raspy voice, Izuku started running faster, a horrid feeling in his gut. May your death bring upon a better world. Rounding a corner, Izuku saw a man in black, covered in spikes and blades, standing over Ida and ready to commit murder. The pro-hero native collapsed against an alley wall. Say what you will about me. Ida's voice was pouring out grief and pain, but you'll still be nothing more than the villain who hurt my brother. Whatever Stain, as there's no one else this could be, but the hero killer, was about to say. Izuku wouldn't find out as he charged in, his footsteps thunderous in the alley, the assassin leaping back to avoid the blow from his massive fist. But dauntless. Ida gaped, eyes widening when he saw who it was. Tenya, can you get native out of here? Izuku demanded even as he hastily reached into a pouch on the back of his tactical vest. I can't move my body. Ida grit his teeth, it has to be his quirk. Damn it. Izuku grit his teeth even as he found a flare gun he'd been looking for, shooting it straight up as the burning purple light filled the sky. The flare was something that Snatch and Crust had made sure every pro, sidekick, or hero student in the city was carrying. An alert that they'd found the hero killer. Get out of here, Dauntless. This isn't your fight, why do you even care? Ida screamed, his body not moving an inch despite the clear desire to thrash about. Shut up, you idiot. Izuku snapped at the engine quirk user. I don't like you, you don't like me. Big fucking deal. There's more important things right now. A slow clap filled the alley at those words as Izuku's head snapped toward Stain, who he just realized hadn't moved after dodging. The serial killer was standing there, watching, listening. Ah, so I was right about you. Stain chuckled, eyes wide with manic glee. So close to being a real hero. It is only your apathy that holds you back. Stain readied his blade as Izuku felt a chill go down his spine, even in his transformed state. He felt like he was in the gaze of a predator looking to play with their food. Let's see what you can do. Stain charged, chipped and jagged blades ready, blades that Izuku had read reports could cut through thick walls of ice or metal without slowing. Meeting the charge, Izuku worked to dodge as best he could, while still keeping himself between Ida and Native. HMPH, you're not as fast as I'd hoped. Stain frowned, ducking and weaving through the punches Izuku was throwing, a thrown knife jamming into his cement gun to render it inoperable. But you're still just a student. I won't let you get to them. Izuku snarled, giving his most intimidating look towards the hero killer. Monsters like you like muscular. I refuse to allow you to keep up your murder. Ah, that's right. Stain scoffed, you seemed quite fond of those water hose fake. The comment was cut off as Izuku finally landed a clean blow to Stain, Izuku's fist bigger than the murderer's head as the villain went flying back. Ah. Izuku grimaced, noting the thin but lightly bleeding cut on his arm, the wound small enough that his regeneration closed it up quickly. Just a drop. Stain raised the sword that he'd cut Izuku's arm with, an unnaturally long and wide tongue, slithering out to lick the blade, and, more importantly, Izuku's blood, as he felt his body go rigid. Your quirk. Izuku grit his teeth, trying to force through the paralysis. You're using my blood as a catalyst to freeze me. HMPH, smart. Stain smirked as he stalked forward, and you're determined to be a true hero. You must learn to be less forgiving of the fakes that pollute our society, which tarnish the name of hero. Still, if you're all done with these distractions, then I have a couple fakes to kill before your backup arrives. The last comment was directed to the still lingering purple flare. Gritting his teeth, Izuku kept trying to break the quirk's hold, feeling his teeth crack from the pressure, even as they worked to fix themselves. Get away from them. Native snarled, the hero having managed to regain enough lucidity to glare at Stain despite the paralysis. They're just kids, damn it. He gave up his right to live the second he called himself a hero and put revenge first. Stain scoffed, pausing to sneer at Native, and was therefore unprepared for the hard punch to slam into his back, sending the serial killer flying into a metal dumpster. What? The bladed man shot his head up, glaring at Izuku, who could move again. How Ida gaped, I still can't move. I can't either. Native struggled with renewed vigor. It must have to do with blood type. Izuku's eyes widened as he remembered a small fact about his quirk he'd always discounted. He was designed to adapt perfectly, and his body had ended up making a special version of O-blood, the universal donor. This could also let him adapt and receive any blood like someone with AB positive. Damn. Stain grit his teeth, I'll just have to move faster. The killer surged forward, not even slowed by the 2 hits Izuku had managed to land so far. Either he had more durability than he appeared to, or the man was better at working through pain than Izuku had expected. Izuku grunted at the thrown knives tossed his way, the weapons not able to get far into his skin, but still pricked him like needles before falling. Less than before. Stain caught some of the blades before they hit the dirt, licking up the blood once again as Izuku stumbled from the paralysis quirk. But like before, he was only frozen for a few seconds before his blood released its grip on his muscles. Troublesome. Stain narrowed his eyes as he seemed to come to a decision, moving in again, swapping out his chipped sword for 2 sturdy-looking daggers. The man was small and slippery, avoiding Izuku's strike as he cut at Izuku's ribs with one blade, bringing it to his own lips in one fluid motion, even as he continued his slide towards a wide-eyed Ida. Then the hero killer recoiled with a startled yell, his tongue showing a blistered burn where Izuku's blood had touched him. Izuku himself meanwhile was doubled over, gasping as he felt his body roiling, like it was changing in a way it never had before. Heads up runts. The eager voice of the rabid hero Mirko filled the alley as the high-ranked pro shot in, slamming into the hero killer to send him rolling back, the unexpected pain from whatever Izuku's blood had done giving her an opening. His blood. Izuku panted, feeling the roiling surge starting to subside. He ingests your blood, and you're paralyzed. So avoid the knives, thanks for the tip greenhorn. Mirko nodded as he struggled to get to his feet, grabbing Native and Ida, get them out of here. The others should be here soon. Don't die. Izuku grit his teeth as he began to draw the paralyzed dead weights. Don't give me orders, brat. Mirko snapped back as she rushed in, attacking the hero killer as Izuku slowly dragged the 2 off, his body feeling sluggish and breathing difficult, even if it was getting easier as he went. Dauntless. Getting closer to the exit, he heard the voice of Gang Orca. Here. Izuku shouted, spotting Gang Orca with several other pros, most of whom rushed past him to try and back up Mirko, snatch and crust among them. Kid, talk to me. Gang Orca noted his shaking, his raspy breath. Hospital. Izuku grunted even as Ida was and Native were taken by some sidekicks they need. So do you. Gang Orca frowned, can you turn back? Bad idea. Izuku shook his head. Whatever his body had tried doing to adapt, it was having side effects that were still being corrected. He needed all his resistances right now. Damn it all. Gang Orca grit his teeth, you lot get them to the hospital. I'm going to go help Endeavor with cleaning up the rest of this mess. He and his kid already have the Nomu handled, but there might be more villains out and about. Sir. The sidekick saluted as they got Izuku and the others into a vehicle. As he got loaded in, he saw a green flare shot skyward, signifying that the hero killer was captured. It was over. Alright, I promised an explanation of Izuku's power. His quirk adapts to things that are a physical harm. So, let's say Kaminari shocking him with electricity. That's a physical harm, so his body and quirk would adapt to negate that threat the more he was exposed. Something like Shinso's brainwashing. Being in that state isn't itself a physical harm, so he wouldn't adapt to that. Seeing illusions of something he fears. He might adapt to any medical concerns like heart stopping or stress, but he wouldn't build up resistances to the illusions themselves, as they aren't the source of the physical harm, his own body was. And fear is something people actually do need, so his body wouldn't be able to adapt that away. Now we get to Stain. His quirk lets him ingest people's blood and use that as a link to freeze their body. By that logic, his quirk somehow ties his quirk factor to their body through the blood, so I had Izuku's body adapt and change his blood after so many times of getting frozen. More details will be shared about that next chapter. I just wanted to give you all a better understanding of what can and can't be adapted to, and how for all situations going forward. Chapter 33. Good news everybody. I took some time off while that pole was going to rest from the solid 2 months of insomnia I've been suffering. I found some medicine that helps, so update speed should start picking up now. To those saying that mind control should still be something he develops resistance to, it has to do with the definition of physical harm, as his quirk only adapts to direct harmful things. Shinso's quirk puts the person in a calm trance, the quirk itself isn't harmful, Shinso uses the state they're in to do harmful things. There's a degree of separation which is the key factor. Stain's blood paralysis, at least in this story, has it where his quirk holds onto the bloody drinks and uses it as a direct tether to paralyze. Forcing the body to lock up like that does not sound healthy and is deemed a harmful thing to adapt to. Izuku can adapt to mental things if they're directly harmful in a physical way, like through pain receptors, and there's no degree of separation. Quirk that causes psychic pain. Direct and therefore adaptable. Quirk that causes you to see what you fear. It has a degree of separation because any harm comes from your own natural reactions to something that the quirk makes you see. And 3. Also, love all the different ideas of adaptations I see in the reviews, you people get creative. And 4. Last and, I promise. I'm going to pick up the manga from the point where the anime left off for me, but does anyone know what manga issue picks up after season 5 ends? What doesn't kill me? Chapter 33. Bang Orca. How is he? Orca frowned as he stood by the doctor, his student intern Dauntless passed out in a hospital bed. Better now thanks to that healing factor of his. The doctor nodded, although it took a bit before he felt it was safe enough to turn back. Given the blood samples we took, I don't blame him. You had needles that could get through his skin. He did a double take at the doctor, having not expected something as thin as a medical needle to do the trick. We have a nurse whose quirk lets them boost the piercing ability and durability of anything they hold. The doctor elaborates, helps when people's quirks make their skin harder like that young man's. Still, his blood has changed since that fight against Stain. The doctor handed over the charts, something Orca only had access to as he was the hero in charge of the kid. His body deemed having his blood taken a threat when it was used by Stain's quirk, so his blood is now highly acidic. It took his own healing being bolstered by the weaker healing quirks of my staff to help speed up his body's adaptations to the point he wasn't burning himself from within. Because his adaptations only show up once the cause is done being healed from. Gang Orca remembered that vaguely from the file UA sent him. I suppose we're lucky Stain was only taking drops of blood from Dauntless. I'm just relieved he got his flare out. The doctor shuddered. Stain was a monster I'm glad is off the streets. Anyway, the acidic blood is only in his transformed state, his base one doesn't have that issue. I'd recommend he take his training easy for a day or two in his other form, possibly just doing studying while transformed to clear up any lingering adaptations his body needs to do in regard to his new blood. Thank you, doctor. He nodded. Is there anything else I should know? For now, no. The doctor shook his head. You can go and wait for the young man to wake up if you wish. I have other patients to go attend to after that madness. Thank you, doctor. Gang Orca nodded as the doctor left, leaving him alone with his passed-out student, finally feeling safe to collapse in a chair and breathe. Izuku. Groaning, Izuku sat up, blinking away spots as he woke. Ah, good, you're awake. A woman in a nurse's uniform smiled at him. I was worried the anesthesia wouldn't work on you given your quirk's resistances. I've never had it used on me before. Izuku groaned as he sat up, his joints cracking from how stiff he was, silently wondering if he'd adapt to the medical drug next. I see. Well, the nurse was cut off by the door opening. A massive man with a dog's head wearing a suit entered, flashing a police badge as he did so. Young man, I'm Chief Tsuragami. The beagle-headed man spoke up, gesturing for the nurse to leave. I'm here to talk to you about the Stain incident. Behind the cop, Izuku saw Gang Orca and even Mirko entering his hospital room. What about it? Izuku winced as he finally managed to get a stubborn spot on his back to pop. It's not normal for a first-year hero student to even encounter one of Japan's most wanted, let alone fight them for any length of time. The chief woofed out. That's because he wasn't fighting me seriously, and my quirk is defensive enough to keep me alive. Izuku sighed out, knowing damn well that was the truth. What do you mean he wasn't fighting you seriously? Gang Orca frowned, Izuku's mentor moving to stand closer to Izuku's side. He seemed entertained by me. Izuku frowned, trying to think how to put it properly into words. He kept going on about how I was so close to his ideal of a true hero. He kept lecturing me during the fight and didn't seem to think I was that much of a threat. Lecturing you? On what? The chief's gaze was laser-focused. About how I shouldn't be so willing to forgive fake heroes. Izuku shook his head. My pledge back at the sports festival. I said I don't care why people want to be a hero, so long as they put saving others above any ambitions. Stain was apparently watching and got angry that I was so close, but had that hang up. Fucked up Fruit Loop. Mirko grumbled irritably, Izuku noting her leg hadn't stopped bouncing since they entered his room. Now what did that poor cereal ever do to you for that comparison? Izuku asked with a weak grin, hoping to ease the tension. The snort from Gang Orca gave him some hope at least. Well, all of that helps actually. The chief nodded. Gang Orca already confirmed that you had permission to use your quirk as you deemed fit in the incident, so that won't be an issue. Your information will help with the profilers who plan to question Stain, as well as those in legal, trying to figure out if they have to worry about his lawyer going for the criminal insanity route. You'll be credited as aiding in the capture of Stain, given you're the one who initially found and slowed him down. At that bit of information, Izuku's eyes widened. That's right, Squirt. Mirko grinned, giving him a thumbs up, and I wanted to thank you as well. At seeing Gang Orca and the chief look at her wide-eyed, the battle bunny gave them both a glare, the two massive men flinching under it. Oh fuck off, I can thank people when they earn it, damn it. Kid's warning about the Dracula Wannabe's quirk helped out, I dodged some hits I would have taken otherwise. Glad to help. Izuku gave his favorite female pro a weak grin, still processing everything and the fact that he was getting a documented assisted arrest already. Does that mean he's going to get part of the pay? Gang Orca decided to ask. I know there's a bounty on Stain's arrest, and there's the usual method a hero gets their pay for stopping crime. But does Dauntless receive a share given his credited assistance? That's up to the commission. The chief shrugged, the answer apparently above his pay grade. There's never been a student taking out a name this big before they even get a provisional license, so I'm not sure how it'll be handled. I do know one thing though. Gang Orca's eyes crinkled as the man smirked teasingly, you'll probably set up a brand new wave of memes given your first ones are so popular. Dauntless, the stain removal hero. Izuku's groan was drowned out by the cackling of the adults who were enjoying his suffering at the imminent bad puns. Scarecrow? Interesting. Jonathan Crane, the Scarecrow, tilted his head as he watched the news feeds from the safe house he and Lobo were currently set up in. What is? Lobo grunted, the blue bruiser draining another beer, seems like heroes just doing their usual boring-ass routine. That Shigaraki brat's jealousy may have given us a few openings. Crane explained, finding having a physically dangerous assistant who was immune to his methods, with the correct mindset at any rate, was quite helpful. Opening? All he did was throw a temper tantrum while failing to recruit a mosquito. Lobo rolled his eyes. But now more attention than ever is on the young Dauntless. Crane's grin was a little wide to be normal, a first year credited with being vital to the takedown of one of the most wanted men in the country. A serial killer who's killed many pros in single combat. As he spoke, Crane took a mock-shocked tone, why isn't someone like that a pro already? You want him put out into the field early so he doesn't have UA's protection. Lobo realized. Exactly. Crane grinned as he finished mixing another batch of hallucinogens, fond of using them along with his quirk as needed. And even if that doesn't work, it'll still put pressure on UA to have him attempt something like a work-study sooner. More time out of the school, more chances for us. Not to mention Shiggy is probably gonna do more stupid shit. Lobo grinned as he picked up the latest weapon All for One had given the man, we could stalk his jobs and take the kid out once he finishes kicking Handjob's ass. Exactly. Crane grinned, so pleased that Lobo was able to pick up on the plan. Brutish the man may be, but he wasn't an idiot most of the time. Anyway, I'm going to arrange a few incidents. I'll use my chemicals and gases on this Dauntless to the point he thinks he's safe and only then use my quirk, let him lower his own guard. The summer camp seems a good time to try and take him. In the meantime, I have a special task for you that I believe you'll find entertaining. Chapter 34. And? Something to state about this fic. A lot of my stories I have a vague idea of where each one shall go. I have specific scenes and plot points planned out going in, and I use those, my existing changes within the story, and the base structure of the world and such to plot out each chapter as I go. This one though, I've recently planned out a rough outline for the rest of the fic and have a planned conclusion. Shit's gonna get focused now. There is a plan and it's about to get real. Ryiko. So, girl, you looking forward to seeing your man's new hero costume? Mina grinned at her as they walked out towards one of the training fields. The internships had just ended and their teachers had decided to see what they had learned with a joint training session. I do not know what you are insinuating, Acid Queen. Ryiko kept herself composed, refusing to allow any blush on her face. She knew damn well what the acid creator was insinuating, but she refused to give Mina the satisfaction. Is that so? Tokage leaned in, joining Mina in the teasing as the girls from the 2 first-year hero courses continued into the large waiting room, still having a few minutes before the lesson was set to actually start. So what you're saying is you won't mind at all if, say, Momo, Kendo, or Ichako tried ogling up your green-haired husbando. Despite the common belief to the contrary, one I am unsure of the origins. I must reiterate, Midoriya is not my husbando as you put it, Lizardi. Ryiko made sure she didn't use Midoriya's first name this time. Just because she felt warm inside whenever he was near doesn't mean she was infatuated with her adaptive friend. I never said it was Midoriya. Tokage grinned wider, there are other green-haired boys here after all. And go on, use his first name, we all know you want to. Ryiko was cut off as they heard some of the boys walking down the hall, having finished changing. "Hey guys, look who finally got himself a hero costume." Kirishima called out, arm around Midoriya's shoulders. Midoriya's costume certainly made him stand out now. Black dress pants and a matching dress shirt. A dark vest with green filigree. A green tie that bore a tie pin looking like the shield crest on the uniforms of the water hose heroes. On his hip was a pistol of some sort, and there was a holster on his back that sat empty for the moment. Yeah, it was a gift from Gang Orca. Izuku gave a grin, running a hand back through his hair, drawing attention to the dark gloves on his hands. "It's all made out of my hair, so it'll grow with me. It's supposed to fix my concerns about costumes being destroyed constantly, although I'm not sure if that means it can fix itself, is more durable, or just easier to repair." She knew it was somewhat rude, but she barely registered what her cross friend. Her damn it, she couldn't even lie to herself about it anymore. "Be back." She grabbed Mina and Tokage, who were grinning, fully aware of what was going on as she drug them off, the boys being confused in the background. "Izuku? What was that all about?" Izuku blinked in confusion as he saw Ryiko drag Mina and Tokage off. "I don't even know, man, girls are confusing." Kirishima sighed, rubbing the back of his head. "I have to ask though, what's with the empty harness thing on your back?" Tetsu asked, gesturing to said piece of apparel. "Well, I got this for when I'm not shifted." Izuku pat the side of his new pistol. "It's one of the cement guns from Gang Orca's agency, just modeled to look more like a traditional pistol to fit my outfit better. Gang Orca's a great mentor, but the man is very insistent on one's tools matching their outfit. Smart man." Yaoyorozu nodded with a small smirk. The other girls Ryiko hadn't drug off, seemingly aware of what was going on, even if they didn't seem all that inclined to share it at the present moment. "Anyway." Izuku gave them a playful mock glare. "This pistol won't exactly work when I'm transformed. My hands are too big to even hold it properly, and if I had it made for my transformed state, then it would be way too big for my untransformed state to use. Not to mention how tricky carrying it would be. Melee weapons have the same issue, so the support course is currently trying to make a durable weapon that can have a collapsible form to carry on my back. That way my transformed state can be elegantly armed, as Gang Orca put it. They're just happy you're finally accepting their help, aren't you?" Kendo smirked as Izuku grimaced. Apparently the first years in the support course have taken it as a competition. Izuku admitted what Power Loader had told him, or at least that's what the support course teacher described it as. "I'm the only first-year hero core student to not ask for any sort of special costume or support gear initially, so now that I finally have put in a request," they're feeling. He trailed off, searching for the right word. "Competitive?" Todoroki supplied. "Exactly." Izuku nodded gratefully to his elemental friend, who returned it. "I must say, I do like the look you're sporting." Shinso nodded. "Makes me wonder if I need a bit more flair to my uniform. Use drama to unsettle my opponents into talking and all that. Have you considered some sort of smokescreen generator?" Izuku asked as the rest of their classmates continued to enter the waiting area. "That plus throwing your voice with those persona chords you told me about would make a really good combination." I haven't. Remind me to swing by the support course later to ask if it's doable." Shinso nodded, seeming eager for new ways to troll people in the name of hero work. "Take protection, things blow up there." Tetsu shuddered. "It can't be that bad, can it?" Shinso frowned before noting the flat stares from everyone else within earshot. "Metapod, Kakuna, your services are needed." "Let the memes die." The tease duo shouted in frustration. "Even the ones mocking the legendary heroic stain remover." Tokage pouted as the trio of girls returned. "Okay, those can stay." Kirishima adjusted his stance as Izuku gaped. "Traitor." He grumbled at his friend, who smirked unashamed. "Not even guilty." Kirishima cackled as the rest of the class finally came in. "Alright class, time to get ready for today's exercise." Vlad King called out as the last student stepped in, this one being Monoma, who was glaring at Izuku's new hero costume. "This one will be similar to the bomb exercise you did at the beginning of term, only this time it will be 2-on-2. Added to that, both teams will know about each other going in, so that there's more time to strategize how you can show off what you've learned and how you've grown. The catch. Each duo will be made of one student from each class." That got a lot of attention as those involved began to whisper about who they thought or hoped would be made partners. First up, we have Izuku Midoriya and Ryiko Yanagi against Katsuki Bakugo and Shoto Todoroki. Aizawa read out the random names before pausing, looking at them again, and muttering something under his breath in frustration. "Well, this be one hell of an opening match." Shinso's deadpan remark summed the situation up nicely. "Nezu?" Frowning, Nezu stirred his tea as he considered the current situation before him. Izuku Midoriya, a first year, and already causing far more drama than his predecessors. The Hero Commission had already come to the decision that as Midoriya was not a licensed hero, he was not entitled to receive a share of the pay for helping to apprehend a villain. Furthermore, as he was not the one to defeat Stain himself, he was not eligible for any amount of the bounty they had placed on the hero killer. If only it was that simple though. There was a debate going through the parliament about what to do with Izuku. Someone had apparently pushed forward a notion to have Midoriya graduated early and drafted to the front lines of hero work. The Hero Commission was backing this idea with the addendum of having him assigned as a sidekick to a respectable hero, code for one of their lackeys. More conservative politicians were against the idea of rushing things, but public opinion and backhouse dealings could sway things far more than he'd like. We need a power player in the political field. Nezu rubbed his temples with frustration. All Might was a respected hero, but not a politician. The best he could do was sway the common people's opinion and direct a paparazzi with his own gravitation. The other alumni, those connected to Midoriya's circle and not, had the same issue. Tsukauchi was a cop, so he was out. I really didn't want to have to do this. Nezu sighed as he flipped a switch. Rapidly, his office walls shifted, becoming soundproof. His windows darkened as they tinted to prevent people from looking in remotely. Finally, he entered a passcode on one of his drawers to pull out a phone he kept for emergencies. A secure line so rarely used to help keep it secret. Why hello there. Nezu's call was answered almost instantly. May I ask who's calling me and how they got this number? I must say, if it's about my car's extended warranty then I'll be hanging up. This is Nezu, principal of UA. Nezu kept any displeasure at having to bring in outside help out of his voice. I've known of this number and who you are for some time. But I've come because I wish to parley for an alliance Riki Yatsubashi. Or do you prefer Re-Destro? Chapter 35. Aizawa. Damn it, this isn't going to be pretty. Aizawa pinched a bridge of his nose as he saw what the randomizer had spat out. At least he hoped it was a randomizer. It could have just as easily been Nezu getting bored and making pairs he found amusing. I already had Cementus and Midnight rig up an emergency system in case any students get too invested in this. Kansas whispered back, gesturing to a button on the console that releases a stored version of Midnight's quirk into the building. They go too far and we can end it that way. And I wasn't told Bikayus. Aizawa's eye twitched. You were napping during the meeting. Kansas didn't even bat an eye as he threw Aizawa and his sleep schedule under the bus. Damn it. Fine, let's see what they do. Their planning period should be over now anyway. Aizawa looked at the screen to see the hero pair of Midoriya and Yanagi entering the building. The villains meanwhile had split off. Todoroki was encasing the room with a bomb in a bubble of ice, while Bakugo was taking off to try and fight Midoriya and Yanagi. He just hoped that was an agreed plan and not Bakugo being a loose cannon. I see Midoriya's taking point. All Might said softly as they observed the screens, the students behind them doing the same. Makes sense with his quirk. Kansas nodded. Yanagi will probably use her quirk to control the capture tape. Let Midoriya be the wall while she uses her telekinesis to attack from any direction. She studied with Captain Celebrity, right? All Might observed the telekinetic girl who had both of the hero team capture tape roles. Yeah, I'm just glad she didn't pick up any bad habits from that idiot. Aizawa nodded. What about Bakugo? He's been subdued since his return. Kansas answered before glancing at the screens, now notwithstanding of course. I don't know what Genus said or did, but the kid's been switching between raging at people and being in silent miserable contemplation. Think we should talk to him? All Might frowned as he saw Bakugo reach Midoriya, the blonde's red eyes blazing with too many emotions to counter-discern from here. I'm already on it. Kansas assured as Bakugo reached them, launching an explosion that was a great deal more controlled than he'd done in the beginning of the year. Even still, it wasn't even close to being enough to damage Midoriya while transformed. Oh, she's certainly improved. All Might smirked, Aizawa following the blonde oaf's eyes to see that Yanagi was manipulating the ground with her telekinesis, preparing traps for Bakugo to fall into, while Midoriya focused on defense. The two were a terrifyingly efficient team already. Added to that, while Bakugo was focused on the mountain of grey muscle that was Midoriya, plus the traps opening up in the floor, he was unaware of the capture tape slithering out of the vents before it wrapped around his limbs. Bakugo is captured. Aizawa called out as the blonde went limp, eyes vacant and unseeing, as he seemed to be struggling to process something. Aizawa hoped the Kansas-esque conversation would be both soon and effective. How do you think they'll handle Todoroki? All Might frowned. I'm not even sure what that girl's upper limit is anymore. Aizawa trailed off as the two students reached Todoroki's ice bubble. Yanagi was concentrating, hands held out towards the ice as it started to vibrate, cracking apart as she used her telekinesis to vibrate the construct. The ice continued to crack apart, broken pieces being caught and hurled at the walls to force a way through, Midoriya helping by punching the weakened ice. The report from Captain Celebrity stated that he didn't focus on practical hero work. Kansas applied, he did some lectures on that, but stated given his history he felt we were better to teach her that than he was. No, he spent that entire week putting her through quirk bootcamp, like what we typically do during the summer session. As the blood hero spoke, the ice broke apart as Midoriya charged in, drawing Todoroki's attention, while Yanagi simply used her power to bring the bomb to her partner. Hero team wins. All Might called out, well done everyone. Alright, next groups will be hero team of Ijiro Kirishima and Satsuna Tokage, against Tetsu and Mina Ashido as the villains. Izuku. Grinning, Izuku stood beside Ryiko, something she'd insisted he stick to calling her just before their match started, looking at the screens where more of their friends were preparing to fight. Is it just me, or do those two seem to have something on their mind outside the fights? Shinso frowned in confusion as they looked at the four on the screens. They're always plotting something. Izuku sighed in fond exasperation at his friends, Ryiko nodding beside him as she shuffled closer. You were talking to them before, do you know what they're planning? He asked the white-haired telekinetic. I might be in the know of the reason as to why our friends are exceptionally enthused for their current bout of combat. Ryiko answered, although you shall have to wait and see as to what the exact reason is for yourself. I believe the term is spoilers, is it not? Sassy little meme queen. Izuku grumbled as Ryiko smiled happily and scooted until she was shoulder to shoulder to him. It made him feel happy although he wasn't sure why. Nezu. I shall await your arrival then. Nezu nodded as he finished the call, hanging up and finally letting out the frustration he felt. The phone was dropped back into its sealed drawer, that line now only going to be used in relation to his potential new ally, so he needed a new one. Nothing is ever easy. Nezu rubbed a hand down his face. At the very least, Destro had agreed to come and parley, he'd even agreed to meet at UA itself. Nezu wasn't sure if that was a sign of good faith, a sign of Destro being arrogant, or what. Either way, he'd agreed to have only himself and Izawa in the room during negotiations. He'd hoped to get Tsukauchi and All Might, but the first was shot down on behalf of being a cop and their deal technically being illegal as it was designed to undermine the government's current actions. All Might on the other hand would have been far too aggressive of a play. In return, Destro agreed to bring two of his allies, Curious and Trumpet. Admittedly, Nezu had fun commenting their real names when Destro had used their coded titles, but the man didn't seem as surprised after Nezu had openly showed he knew who Rikiyu was. It's for my students. Nezu repeated his mantra to calm himself down. He knew this could end in either brilliance or disaster with no middle ground available and just prayed he made the right call. It's for my students and my country. Pissing off the commission is just a bonus. The last party let a bit of his sadistic smirk shine through. If nothing else, this would be interesting. Turning to the screens that showed his current problem child, a phrase he'd never thought he'd adopt from Izawa, Nezu noted that the match of the two Hardening students along with their friends were fighting. The boys were having another slugfest, while the girls were testing ability dodge against ability to hit a moving target with streams of acid. The match, in the end, was a draw, but the girls seemed happy about it, telling something to the boys who seemed confused but nodded. Most of the matches were nowhere near as dramatic as the interclass trainings typically were, but then again, this was just the students showing off what they'd learned in their internships. Seeing young Kendo knock out her own partner when Monoma ended up grabbing somewhere he shouldn't have to copy Aoi Rosu's quirk in the scuffle was funny though. He did hope it was an accident, but that was for their teachers to figure out. One thing that did grab his attention was young Ida cornering Uraraka as their match ended, seemingly pushing for something. The girl was confused and very on guard at first, but after a bit seemed to wilt and relent. How strange. As they returned, theirs being the final match, he saw Uraraka approaching Midoriya, gesturing to Ida who was staying behind as everyone else began filing out to change out of their costumes and head home for the day. Now what is this about? Nezu steepled his fingers, needing to know. Izuku. Uraraka said you wanted to talk to me. Izuku crossed his arms as he stood in front of Ida, the engine quirk user having somehow convinced his friend to pass along the message as the rest of the classes filled out of the room, leaving the two alone. Ida took a deep breath before getting on his knees, forehead pressed to the ground. I wish to offer my deepest apologies. What? Izuku blinked, this being the last thing he'd expected today. Well, second to last, Bakugo doing it was more unlikely. I was wrong. Ida was trembling, and Izuku wasn't sure if it was from self-loathing or having to force out the words, I treated you like scum. I looked for the worst in everything you did. But when I almost spat on everything my family raised me to do, to believe, you still saved me anyway. I don't expect friendship, I don't expect forgiveness. But I have to make it clear that I am sorry, that I regret what I've done, and that I intend to change. I stand up Ida. Izuku gave a tired and confused smile as he pulled the tall teen up. We both could have handled things better before. And what you did wasn't. I've been through worse. It wasn't the time or place to get into his past school interactions. I'm willing to bury the hatchet though, to start over if you are. Ida's grateful smile let Izuku know he did the right thing. Chapter 36. Man. Alright everyone, serious question time. I've had person after person asking or hoping for Izuku to get one for all in this fic. I don't aim to do that for the simple reason as it would take out any suspense in the story and make every fight too easy. With his resistance ability and healing factor, plus existing muscle, he'd have it mastered ridiculously quick and it would evolve his existing quirk to the point that literally nothing would be able to physically hurt him ever. The tension would be gone. It might make for an interesting political story. How people react to someone truly invincible, but that's not what I'm aiming for here. But I'm not opposed to such a power scale for its own story if that's the point. This would be a collection of one-shots rather than a full story, unless I get really inspired anyway. But I want to know if you all would like that. A story where Izuku has a quirk that puts him leagues above anything else people thought possible to focus on how he reacts to never being challenged anymore and how the world reacts to him. Nezu. Welcome Rukia. Nezu smiled politely at the trio from the Metal Liberation Army. I have a meeting room prepared this way. Giving a gesture, Aizawa started walking, Nezu currently riding on the underground hero's shoulder. I must say Principal Nezu, I was surprised to get your call. Destro gave him a bemused smirk, let alone an invitation to the prestigious UA. I'm assuming everyone else is gone at the moment. Yes, the 5 of us are the only ones here. Nezu nodded, not wanting to let word get out before he was ready. That said, he still had a small army of robots on hand if things went south and a panic button ready to call every hero he could. Any chance of me scoring an interview with the most elusive pro-hero in recent media history? Curious grinned, her expression somehow both playfully teasing and completely honest as she looked at Aizawa. None. Aizawa grit out, thankfully keeping his quirk from triggering threateningly. Honestly Nezu was just glad the man didn't hiss like a cat at water. Pooh. Curious pouted as the 5 got to the meeting room, Destro pulling out some sort of device. Probably scanning for bugs or microphones. It's clean. The man nodded to his 2 subordinates who nodded pleased as everyone took their seats. Before we begin, I have a question. Trumpet, better known as Koku Hanabata, leader of Hearts and Minds Party, leaned forward. I'm assuming it's why I never did anything if I knew your identities already. Nezu remained calm as he prepared tea, offering it to both Aizawa and his guests. Exactly. Trumpet nodded, the man much more on guard than his boss or colleague. Simple, I saw no need to. Nezu smiled as he sipped his tea, noting Destro doing the same. And no need. Trumpet was flabbergasted. May I be frank? Nezu looked at the trio politely, waiting for Destro's nod before continuing. I find many of the current government's laws to be stupid. The majority of the quirk-based laws were on the books before even your father's aims to have them lifted. He nodded to Destro, laws back when the numbers of quirk versus quirkless were far different than they are now. When we were still arguably in the dark ages of quirks. Those laws were made out of fear and made to be restrictive. As you humans gained more understanding of quirks, the fear turning into pride, those laws stayed though. Do you know why? Control. Destro nodded with calm that concealed rage Nezu knew was smoldering within. Exactly. Nezu's scar pulsed in phantom pain as he gave a sadistic smile, specifically the control of the Hero Commission and the politicians in their pocket. The commission would label you a villain as they did your father. But he is only a villain because he lost. The commander of the Liberation Army's eyes narrowed at that, and what are you hoping to insinuate through that? The man's tone showed the whole potential for this meeting would hinge on Nezu's next answer. The man sought to fight against a government he thought as oppressive. Against laws he saw as corrupt. Nezu hid any nervousness he felt as he stirred his tea. He knew anyone could realistically destroy him in a straight fight, and Aizawa might not be able to stop all 3 before they could do so if this went south. Look at your human history for a moment. The American Revolution. It was people who fought against laws and a government they felt was corrupt. To England they were rebels, criminals, villains. But to their fellows they were freedom fighters, a resistance. They won so they were remembered as such. History is written by those who win, and the government in favor of control won when your father sought to bring about change. You don't see us as villains, you don't see my father as a villain. Destro set his tea down, the man not even bothering to hide his surprise. You've yet to show me otherwise. Nezu pulled out a copy of Destro's book, printed for Nezu's eyes. Your father's stated goals were about a world where quirks were not feared. Where people could use the gifts they were born with. It made no mention of oppressing those without quirks. It made no mention of only the strong may live while the weak perish. Simply, we have the right to do what we were born with the ability to do. That any laws related to quirks should simply be in the act they're used for, relating to the crime not the quirk. You've yet to show me your motives are different. Or at least you really hope they weren't. The My Liberation Army, it is one's personal duty to work with their quirk. Destro leaned back in his chair, offering clarification. Was it possible the man was hoping to recruit them as official members? That it is one's responsibility to work to push their gifts as far as they can go. But what about those with weak quirks? Or no quirks? Nezu raised an eyebrow, curious as to where this would go. Even a weak quirk could be trained. Destro's tone was careful. The man was either considering the question carefully and being careful of his words to not send the wrong message, or he was simply bending his ideals in the hopes of a favorable alliance. And the quirkless. As Awa pushed, the man's quirk having him fight all but quirkless, so it made sense he had at least some strong feelings towards their plight. I've not thought that much on them. My focus was on the laws that oppress those with quirks. Denying freedoms that should be as natural as breathing. Destro shook his head. Nezu hoped the man was being honest. But I doubt you called us in to have a political debate. Curious spoke up. The stop one actually. Nezu looked over at Trumpet One. I'm sure you're at least vaguely aware of given Parliament is debating on forcing one of my students into early graduation and onto the front lines. That dauntless boy who fought Stain. Destro let a flash of anger shine in his eyes before it vanished. Interesting. Exactly. Nezu nodded. I don't have anyone in the political field I can call an actual ally. You however. Have Trumpet. Destro nodded, figuring out where this was going. You want my resources and the political party Trumpet heads to stop this debate in Parliament. Or at the very least do what's possible to mitigate it. Nezu nodded. He'd prefer it be stopped flat out, but he knew not only was it potentially too much to ask, but having more range on his wants would make any sort of deal easier to secure. It would be foolish to force the boy out so far. Destro frowned, especially after he helped remove that bastard Stain. Ooh, there was animosity there. Most interesting indeed. You've yet to saw how this would benefit us though. Trumpet frowned. As I said, I agree with the ideals preached by Destro. Nezu kept his statements carefully crafted, that punishing someone for using their quirk to commit a crime is reasonable, but that using the quirk itself should not be an inherent crime. I would be willing to help promote such ideals, so long as it does not turn classist or quirkist. I'd introduce you to young bright minds attending my school and those already graduated. After all, the best way to shape the future is to mold the next generation. Destro let out a laugh, holding out his cup. Why Principal Nezu, I believe we have a deal to hammer out details on. More tea please. Izuku. So, any idea what this is about? Izuku frowned as he looked at Kirishima and Tetsu. The two hardening quirk users were, much like himself, not dressed in their usual styles, and did your parents force you guys to dress up too? Yeah. Kirishima rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Mom seemed really excited for some reason. Yeah, mine too. Tetsu nodded, it was weird. But nah, I don't know anything except Mina said we'd be meeting here. Hey boys. Hearing the voice of said bubbly pinkette, Izuku turned to see Mina, Tokage, and Ryiko all waiting for him. Izuku was vaguely aware that Mina and Tokage had dressed up somewhat as well, but he honestly couldn't pull his eyes from Ryiko. Even with his nicer clothes on he felt underdressed as he looked at her. She was wearing her usual favorite color of white, although this time she'd added more colors to accessorize. Her white skirt had a green belt. Her blouse had green filigree and designs. There was even a clip in her hair. Izuku was so distracted by how beautiful she looked, it took him a moment to realize that the green of her accessories and the makeup he was noticing now matched his hair. He felt his cheeks growing warm. I hate Tokage. Kirishima spoke up to his side, the crimson bulwark stammering and stuttering, you look great. So do you Mina. Tetsu sounded just as thrown as Kirishima. Thank you Izuku. Ryiko gave him a shy smile, her own cheeks reddening, as he continued to stare dumbstruck. I'm really glad you came. She was wringing her hands, sounding like she'd been practicing this, especially if she wasn't as verbose as she usually was. Of course, Ryiko. Izuku gave her a warm smile, hoping he could make her relax. Why did you ask us all to come? Kirishima gulped even as Tokage linked her arm with his. Simple my red pointy friend. Tokage all but purred as Mina copied her actions with Tetsu. You three have the privilege of taking the three of us out on a date today. At those words, Izuku's gaze snapped to Ryiko's, noting her shy expression as she tucked some hair behind her ear, but didn't deny it. He remembered her strange reaction to him first coming out in his new hero costume. The warm feeling that he got in his gut whenever he smiled that couldn't tell what it was until now at least. Sweet mercy, he felt like an idiot. Then I suppose we should get started. Izuku worked to muster up all the courage he could as he smiled at Ryiko, taking her hand with his own as she leaned into his side. So yeah, as you can probably tell, I'm fond of the idea of the MLA and less fond of the commission. I've only seen the dubbed anime so far, so I'm unsure if things change later, but from what I saw it felt like any villainous aspects felt kind of tacked on or forced. The whole caste system are weak is worthless, don't match, we were born with this, so we have the right to use what we were born with, damn it. Chapter 37. I'll be out of town for a bit over a week soon for a family reunion, so this will be the last update for a couple weeks. And 2. To elaborate on the potential one-shot series mentioned last time, I wasn't specifically stating it would be Doomsday Izuku getting OFA. I meant a different idea of similar power scaling being the focus. In all honesty, I have two different ones thought of, each having an Izuku with a wildly different personality from the other. To compromise, I'll plan some omic for this story that show Doom Zuku with OFA. Sound good? And 3. To those saying Nezu being okay with the liberation movement because being able to use your quirk for a job would destroy the job market are completely missing the point. In the My Hero Academia universe, as it's explained, any quirk use outside of one's home is deemed illegal and would get you arrested. Inko Midoriya using her quirk to get something from the top shelf at the grocery store if she couldn't reach it would be deemed illegal. That level of restriction is absurd. As for the job market thing, that area is already screwed, given how often job hunting is based on who you or your family knows, rather than actual skill. Plus saying, oh, you have a quirk that lets you perfectly control the cooking process when you're in the kitchen. Sorry, but you're not allowed to use that if you want to work for our restaurant, it wouldn't be fair otherwise sounds like a weak argument. Chapter 37. Retestro. Hearing the car door close, Rikiya finally allowed his face-splitting grin to show, a happy tear going down his cheek. Grand Commander, are you alright? Curious asked, the blue-skinned woman thrown off guard by the sudden change. I am overjoyed, Curious. He laughed boisterously as the car began its way back to Deka City, finally. Finally, we find someone outside our movement who believes the truth. That my father wasn't a villain. And more than that, they wished to ally themselves with us. I noticed that you were somewhat evasive when it came to the quirkless or those whose quirks are inherently weak. Trumpet frowned as the driver continued onward, the three of them having privacy to speak in the back. I'm aware of how many in the Liberation Army feel about those groups. Rikiya shook his head, not commenting about Trumpet's own personal views about how some people's quirks, should they be too simple or rigid, couldn't grow and therefore had no place in society. Curious on the other hand would have just been more concerned about getting an interesting story out of them. But I also know that Nezu, and by extension the others at UA, would not share those views. This alliance, it could be the tipping point. The start of a truly liberated future. I do not wish to drive away this ally before the deal was even written upon paper. I understand, Grand Commander. Trumpet bowed his head in acquiescence, accepting his word. I do have a question though. Curious leaned forward, eyes wide and sparkling with the trait that had birthed her codename. I never realized you hated Stain so much. Care to share? That filth, Rikiya's happy expression instantly hardened into a mask of murderous rage, murdered many who sought liberation. There were several heroes who he slaughtered or crippled, some even full members of our movement who became heroes just so they would be allowed to use their quirks. To use the gifts that nature gave them. I hate him. Rikiya felt dark veins appear on his skin as his quirk flared in response to his rage. I guess that's just another reason to help this Midoriya kid. Trumpet grinned, working to defuse the heavy atmosphere of the car. Nezu said the kid worked with Gang Orca, right? And that Mirko was apparently offering what help she could. I think I'll capitalize on that. At the very least, I have some backup plans they could be used for if I can't stop the push completely. Trumpet, you always have a plan, my friend. Rikiya grinned, his bloodlust vanishing in an instant as he relaxed, reaching into the limo's minibar to pour himself a drink. I will have to ask for Skeptic to assist me though. Trumpet continued, making Rikiya pause. The two rarely work together on major projects, their fields and focus different. I was unaware that Skeptic had any open affiliation with the Hearts and Minds party. Rikiya finished pouring the drink. He knew full well their public personas had zero connection and was expecting an explanation to come forth and soon. This movement to have the kid be advanced. It feels forced. Trumpet frowned as he tried to find the right words, and it doesn't fit the usual mo of the party that put it forward. Do you think someone else is pulling things behind the strings? Curious realized, eyes sparkling with eagerness for gossip and story. I think there's more going on than Nezu's telling us. Trumpet elaborated, some enemy or faction behind the scenes he doesn't want known. But if there is someone behind the scenes, I'd rather have Skeptic looking into every shadowy corner he can. Who knows, if there is something Nezu's hiding from us, then finding out on our own gives us the power if we'll ever need to renegotiate. I'll have him informed. Rikia nodded, seeing the sense in Trumpet's theory. For now I want you to focus on Parliament. Curious, you're to focus on the court of public opinion. Let's show our fuzzy new friend what we can do, shall we? Bakugo. Panting, Bakugo continued to slam his fists into the punching bag. The sting of the impacts having long since faded into numbness as he roared and raged, trying to burn all his anger out so he could think. It was almost all he'd been able to do since getting back from that egotistical prick gymnast. And he hated every second of it. Apart from forcing him to wear those stupid blue jeans and don the most fuckboy haircut Bakugo had ever seen, the internship had focused on one single thing. Perception. Specifically, how the public viewed Bakugo and people like him. Gymnast had tried just lecturing for the first couple days, but when he saw that Bakugo hadn't really been listening, he took a different approach. Twitter. The hero showed him every post he could find about Bakugo's performance in the sports festival. Showed him every response from people. There had been some defending him but so many others condemning his actions. Then there were the ones saying he hadn't done enough to the bitch, along with several comments showing a distaste for women in general that had honestly left him feeling more than a little uncomfortable. Gymnast had then showed him how the hero ranking system worked. The percentages between cases solved and pure popularity polls. He saw how in recent years, Endeavor had solved more cases than All Might had, but All Might was still ranked number 1. All through the sheer power of popularity, charisma, and a winning smile. Finally, Gymnast had showed him the history and records of other heroes. The ones who had acted like All Might and the ones who had acted more like Bakugo. He showed how few that acted like he did ever escape the barest dregs of mediocrity as heroes. How many had turned traitor and become villains of much greater notoriety. Fucking die. Bakugo screamed, punching the bag hard enough for the old chain holding it up to snap, the stand crashing to the ground. I'm not a villain. Bakugo was on the ground, shaking and refusing to admit to the tears dotting his eyes. I'm not. He didn't notice when his mother entered, his entire being focused on refusing what had been shown. Izuku. Izuku was on cloud 9 as he finally walked back inside his home, the feel of Ryiko's lips on his cheek at the end of the date lingering. Well, there's my little Romeo. His mom cooed, pulling him into a hug happily as he entered. I see the date went well. He blushed as she looked at his cheek, some lipstick probably still there. It was great. Izuku couldn't help but smile despite the teasing. We're going to be going on another one with just the two of us in a couple days. Today had been great, but the group date also wasn't as personal. It had mainly been agreed on by the girls so they could offer each other support on the confessions. I'm so proud of you, sweetie. His mom gave him a warm smile. Ryiko is a sweet girl, and I'm glad she makes you happy. Thanks, mom. Izuku smiled, leaning into the hug. So, what can I expect, grandkids? And just like that, his mom was back to teasing. Mom. Chapter 38. Man. Sorry about the long delay getting this out. I got back from my family reunion and then got diagnosed with COVID only a couple days later. Took forever just to be able to recover enough to find the energy to write these posts, even with how short they are. Still, next ones will be longer, I promise. And 2. The omic is just a dumb little idea I had that I wish to include. Nezu. Running a paw down his face, Nezu sat across from the MLA Lieutenant Trumpet, Destro, currently getting a tour of the support course area to look for potential students to offer internships to a det nerd. My apologies for the limited success. Trumpet had a scowl on his face as he settled into the chair, the man clearly not happy with what had happened with Parliament. We knew this was a possibility. Nezu sighed, stirring his tea. Luckily we mitigated most of the issue. Barely. Trumpet scowls. In the couple weeks since he'd first met with the MLA faction, Parliament had pushed further and faster with emotion. In the end, Midoriya had been given something akin to a provisional license. The commission and the factions pushing had pointed out that anyone who could be such a massive help in taking down Stain, someone who'd killed or crippled dozens of respected pro-heroes, was clearly not just some regular student. Thankfully, Trumpet and public opinion pushed back thanks to Curious, had things be limited. Midoriya would do patrols in the general area around UA and Mustafu in the afternoons. The various heroes he'd patrol with would offer more lessons on factors such as hero law, filing paperwork, and other hero aspects that Midoriya wouldn't have had a chance to learn yet. The mornings would have the young man still be at the school to attend his regular courses. Not to mention things such as exam days and the training camps. I suppose it is better than the alternative. Gang Orca and Mirko have offered to look after the kid when they can on these patrols. Trumpet nodded. The one solid victory had been preventing the commission from assigning Midoriya to anyone of their choosing. I received similar offers from Sir Night-Eye, Fatgum, Ryukyu, and Endeavor as well. Nezu smirked, enjoying getting one up over the commission, even if it toed the line of a Pyrrhic victory. So at least there's that. Trumpet nodded before grimacing. Also, I have a warning for you out of good faith. Curious is quite eager to interview that Midoriya boy. Oh well, this will be interesting. Izuku. Good work today, kid. Gang Orca gave him a thumbs up as they got back to UA, the daily patrol having wrapped up. Thanks. Izuku grinned back at his mentor, glad he at least got to patrol with heroes who were supportive. The whole incident left a bad taste in his mouth and felt wrong, but he couldn't place his finger on what exactly about it bugged him. How's that melee weapon for your transformed state coming along? Orca asked as they walked to the locker rooms where Izuku was supposed to store his hero uniform until he was deemed fully graduated. It's going. The support course are apparently still arguing between a spear, an axe, or a hammer. Izuku chuckled sheepishly, glad he at least had his cement pistol. Well, let me know when they've got one made. I'll see if any of my sidekicks can help with training, or I'll find another pro who can help. Gang Orca gave him a slap on the back, nodding to some shocked Gen Ed students. Right. Izuku grinned wider, I'll just have to make it through tomorrow. Tomorrow? Izuku's mentor looked confused. Mirko again? No, actually, tomorrow I'll be patrolling with Endeavor. Izuku winced, he's the dad of one of my friends. And I'm pretty sure there's some family drama I don't know about on top of the fact I know how often people pester Endeavor on his patrols about his attitude. Yes, he does have a lot of mixed opinions from the general public. Gang Orca nodded, but still he's a strong and determined hero. I expect you to do your best to learn all you can from him. Yes, sir. Izuku nodded with a grin, quickly taking off and putting away his uniform, while Gang Orca set back out to finish his own proper patrol. As he wrapped up, Izuku could hear the sound of his friends heading down the hall to meet him. Life might not be normal, might not be what he expected, but there was still good in it. Amik. Izuku. Sighing, Izuku ignored yet another sneak attack from Mirko as they went about their patrol. The hero he shadowed for these changed from day to day, and each one had their own habits and quirks he had to get used to. Mirko's just so happened to be that she was determined to catch him off guard. He'd actually blocked at first, but after a while he just stopped bothering and ignored her. Her reactions were much more amusing that way. Damn it, kid. Mirko grumbled as her latest surprise kick didn't even make him budge, let alone react. Do you just lay there for your girlfriend too? The difference is my girlfriend can actually make me feel something. Izuku didn't even miss a beat as he shot right back at his hot-headed mentor. Oh, it's on now, twerp. Chapter 39. Man. Alright everyone, I'm planning the next couple of chapters before the final exams to be split between Izuku's new patrols and some character development bonding with other characters. If there's something specific anyone would like to see, let me know. Endeavor. Just ask already. Endeavor rumbled as he and Dauntless worked on their patrol. Ever since he picked up his son's friend that morning, the boy had seemed tense, like he was trying to decide whether or not to ask a question that was bothering him. Why did you offer to help me? Dauntless finally mustered up a spine to ask as they did their patrol. Because of what you did for my son. Endeavor shrugged, not seeing any reason to lie or beat around the bush. You helped support him when he was in a bad place. You defended him in front of the world at the sports festival. You helped him in his training. Not to mention you've been his friend when he didn't have any before. That's it. Dauntless looked surprised. Do I need another reason? Endeavor raised an eyebrow as they started walking towards the last leg of the morning patrol before they'd start making their way back to UA. It's just Dauntless trailed off uncertain. Not what you expected given public opinion. Endeavor wasn't fazed, he knew how everyone saw him, not to mention what Shoto might have told you. He hasn't really said anything. Dauntless admitted as they rounded another corner to a road full of pricey shops. I've noticed he always looks confused when he talks about you, but he never explained why. My family is complicated. Endeavor shook his head, but it seems to be having some improvements. Regardless, this time is meant to be used to help your ability as a hero. Now, I've heard you've been showing promise in patrol organization with Gang Orca. What is planned quizzing of the young hero was cut off by an explosion, glass flying from the windows of a shop ahead. Dauntless, start escorting civilians to safety. Endeavor wasted no time rocketing forward, hearing the sound of heavy pounding footsteps as Dauntless followed suit. As he approached the store, he saw a group of villains wearing, of all random things, American biker-style outfits. The wild bunch were laughing as they ran out of the store, sacks full of stolen goods over their shoulders. Oh fuck, it's Endeavor. One of the thugs had a look of terror on their face as he rocketed towards them, his speed bolstered by the power of his flames. Use the thing. Use the thing. Another screamed as they scrambled to pull some canisters out of their belts, ones he couldn't just melt in case they were explosive, and made the situation worse. Endeavor reached them and threw a hard punch, knocking out the first thug as he shot a blast of fire at a second. Unfortunately, the third managed to smash open a canister as gas filled the street, expanding far more rapidly than other he'd seen. Endeavor doubled over, coughing from the gas filling his lungs, his vision starting to blur, even as he fought to get back on his feet and reach the last villain. His vision started to darken as he found himself in some sort of void, the sounds of the panicking civilians and the coughing villain still reaching his ears. "Why, father?" Hearing a distorted agonized voice that was oh so painfully familiar, Endeavor's head snapped to the side. He saw Toya, his boy, crawling from an alley. Toya's body was covered in burns, the flesh that wasn't blackened, rotting away and filled with maggots. "Why didn't you save me? You left me to die. You replaced me. Why? What did Shoto have that I didn't?" Endeavor felt his breath growing heavy and rapid as he saw the shambling corpse wearing the face of his son crawling towards him. "You're not real." Endeavor roared, his flames flaring with his rising heart rate, even as he heard others nearby starting to scream and shout in complete and utter terror. "Get away. Get them off me. Mercy. I don't want to die. Enough." Endeavor tried to summon a fistful of flames only for the lingering gas nearby him to detonate, sending him flying against the wall, even if the vision seemed less solid now. "Heads up number 2. A voice he vaguely recognized as a local hero shouted. A man in firefighter garb ran in, firing pressurized water at the road to make a foray to start washing the gas from the air. The cold of the water further helped Endeavor snap out of what he now recognized as hallucinations. Remembering the third villain who'd started this whole mess, Endeavor whirled around only to see the man unconscious by a panting Dauntless. The giant gray-skinned student was panting, eyes wild and frightened at the mental assault. "Dauntless, get those canisters bagged and sealed now." Endeavor barked, pointing at the 3 metal cylinders, the partially opened one possibly having more gas to let out when not wet. "Backdraft, keep that water going until the canisters are put away, the gas is from those." Endeavor turned towards the local hero who nodded, still keeping up the foray, as Endeavor made sure there weren't any more villains in the area. Backdraft's partner is finishing up with clearing the area of civilians. Sweet mercy. Endeavor actually allowed himself to collapse against the wall once the area was confirmed clear, HPC cleanup crews arriving rapidly. "Report." One of the HPC agents demanded as they noted Endeavor slumped against a wall, Dauntless not looking much better. "Chemical weapon." Dauntless answered before Endeavor could, "Hallucinogen gas. Containers were high quality, not cheaply made or quirk produced. Means money and intellect backing." Endeavor realized the kid was rambling out analysis just to not focus on whatever the gas had made him see. Gas moved quickly too, expanded, and the containers didn't show any sign of leaking. They were made by an expert. Designed to incapacitate any heroes who came after them. Found gas filters in villain jackets, thugs too panicked to use them. Meaning they'd just gotten lucky. This is the third case today. The agent scowled at the 3 villains being loaded into a criminal transport. Hawks and Ryiko also had to deal with similar situations. A group of villains dressed like bikers, all having these same cylinders. Only one of these 3 went off. Endeavor knew it would be miserable for the kid, but it would help Dauntless in the long run. "Is it possible for me to take one? I wish to get it analyzed, my flames detonated it, and I need to make sure there aren't any other issues." "Very well, Endeavor." The agent nodded, having one of the 2 unopened canisters handed over, not questioning him due to rank. "Come on, Dauntless, let's get you back to UA." He wiggled the can once the agents were gone. "I'd rather Nezu take a look at these. Not to mention, if possible, this could let Dauntless get exposed to, and therefore build up resistance against, such chemical attacks in a controlled environment." Izuku. Still feeling twitchy after what he'd seen from the gas, Izuku made his way towards the support studio to see what options the support course had developed for him. He needed something, anything, to get his mind off what had happened earlier. "Ah, hello there." Hearing a voice he didn't recognize as he entered the workshop, Izuku looked in surprised at a tall balding man with a rather large nose. Hi." Izuku looked over at Power Loader in confusion. "This is Riki Yatsubashi." The support teacher explained. "He's the CEO of Detonarit and has been looking at the work of my students to see about offering internships." "Yes, I hope you don't mind, but I was curious about seeing how their pieces work with the young hero they're made for." The CEO nodded with a genial smile as Izuku nodded in hesitant confusion, wondering about the odd presence the man exuded. "Well, Midoriya, we have a few options." Power Loader took over, noting Izuku's awkwardness. "First is a simple collapsible staff." He pulled up the large rod which could shrink into a smaller form that could still fit on his back in his untransformed state. It was rather basic but looked serviceable. "Maybe." Izuku frowned, it didn't really grab his attention, but he didn't want to be rude. Especially if it affected a student's shot of getting an internship with a big support company. "Second, we have a collapsible scythe." Power Loaded showed the heavily over-designed weapon. It looks impressive, but I don't know if I have the time to focus on a weapon like that, Izuku admitted. The scythe looking like a weapon that would take an absurd amount of training just to not risk hitting himself or someone else he wasn't aiming at when swinging it around the way the notes attached implied it was meant to. Plus I'm worried about that many moving parts with how many heavy hits I plan to take. It looks impressive, but I don't think it's for me. Fair enough. Power-loaded shrugged as he pulled out the last item, and third, we have this. It was a large pole arm with one half of the weapon head showing a gleaming axe head, while the other showed a blunt hammer face. He noticed the haft was similar to the first weapon in the telescopic effect. The entire thing is made out of hyper-dense material and reinforced from within by a structure similar to bird wings. The reinforcement brace is able to snap into place as you expand it. Izuku took the weapon, giving it a practice swing as he found the weight, while heavy enough to hurt if one got hit with it, wasn't as bad as he expected given the super dense metal used in its construction. Probably done in such a way so as to keep it expandable. Some students tried making a handle that could create an energy weapon, but that's still a work in progress. Power Loader shrugged even as he eyed Izuku testing the weight of the weapon, but either way it looks like we have a winner. Yeah, this one works. Izuku was still twitchy, but caught the shared glance between the two adults. He hoped this blew over soon. Izuku. Giving a roar, Izuku charged into the base of the League of Villains, his body crackling with black lightning, even as his muscles and body dwarfed that of All Might. One for all, the most absurd offensive quirk Izuku had ever seen was not only allowing him to hit harder than All Might could, but it had also supercharged his own ability. Where before he could recover within 24 hours, extreme injuries taking that entire time, now it was more akin to hyper-regeneration. His body adapted to things much faster and got more payout for each adaptation he experienced. Fucking die. The lunatic from the USJR anned him, near rabid with rage as he grabbed at Izuku's arms, the skin starting to decay and crack apart, only for Izuku's healing to overtake it, the adaptation making it do less and less, until the villain's quirk was near useless within seconds. And so, it continued. Abi's flames gave no sense of heat to him. Muscular's first broke against Izuku's jaw. Toga's knife bent against his arm. Then there were the hundreds of quirks that all for one sent at him. Each one doing little to nothing as he powered through, grabbing the ancient super-villain by the skull. And there was nothing any of them could do to stop him. And that right there was a look at why I never wanted to give Izuku one for all. It would make things too easy. We know it gives super strength while also supercharging the existing quirk, and so there was no way to let him have both without him becoming way too strong. Could this work for a story? Yes, but not the one I'm trying to write. A story like that would have to be either focused on character interactions or focused on how Izuku handles a world without a challenge. This was my first chaptered My Hero fic, and I didn't want to do something like that for my first foray outside of little one-shots. To counter another train of thought, could I have given Izuku a much weaker version of his quirk and let Ofa boost it to the level we see in the story or a little above? Also, yes, but that didn't feel right to me either. Chapter 40. And gonna start the final exam arc either next chapter or the one after. I think I've gotten some interesting tests for everyone. And 2. Sorry about how long it's been on this story. This chapter did not want to be written. And 3. Apologies how long it's been since I made any posts. My wife and I lost a beloved pet recently, so inspiration or energy to write has been hard to come by. Endeavor. Running a tired hand down his face, Endeavor trudged into his home. His fingers were still twitching erratically from the earlier gas he'd been exposed to. Father, you're home. Fayumi perked up as he walked in. I was getting worried. I thank you. Endeavor kept himself from frowning, unsure how to really respond to his daughter voicing concern at him coming home late. You missed dinner, so I ate your share. Natsuo showed exactly zero concern as he relaxed in the living room. HNN. Endeavor let out a noise that was somewhere between a grumble and a growl, still feeling especially twitchy. Fayumi and Natsuo both noticed something was off at that, the twitchiness not his normal state of being, not to mention there being no sign of active flames anywhere. Did something happen, father? Fayumi wrung her hands nervously as he trudged into the kitchen, slowly getting the water even with his hands still trembling slightly. New villain gang. He scowled, wanting his kids prepared just in case they used chemical weapons. He drained the glass of water in a single gulp as he worked to fill it up again. I've been put on leave for now. Say what? Natsuo actually looked shocked, although something told Endeavor it probably wasn't for indignation at the situation. Hawks and Ryukyu are experiencing the same. He grabbed a frozen meal. The gas causes hallucinations, along with extreme levels of adrenaline. Elevated heart rate and rapid breathing too. Given the nature of our quirks and strength, the commission is worried about us lashing out or losing control. So, until there's no residual sign of the gas in my system, I'm not allowed to do any hero work. The commission had happily declared Dauntless fit to continue, however. It wouldn't surprise him if they started trying to send the boy into the most toxic environments they could soon. At least Backdraft had agreed to take over looking after the kid for now. Apparently, the man was old friends with the Waterhose duo and offered to look after Dauntless for a bit. The fact that if the boy wasn't already fireproof then he was damn close no doubt helped the situation. Perfect for dealing with the flames of burning buildings the fire rescue hero focused on. Hopefully he'd take care about smoke inhalation at the least. What did you see? Fayumi asked, her voice both nervous and curious. He was stonily silent as he looked at his reflection in the microwave, remembering back to the hallucination he'd seen. The waking nightmare of his eldest child's burnt and rotting body crawling towards him, face twisted in agonized rage. A face that was so like Endeavor's own brother. Be safe when going to school tomorrow. He couldn't bring himself to answer, taking his little microwave dinner. If you see criminals in American biker clothes, seeing his hand trembles get worse, he quickly moved to his private office. He needed to be alone. Nezu. Frowning, Nezu looked through the various reports of the new criminal gang, known as the Wild Bunch. While they'd been doing heists all over Japan, he noticed a worrying pattern. Most areas that got attacked weren't hit again. The larger cities, like Tokyo, got hit a few times. But the area around UA was hit every day without fail. And young Midoriya had been caught in those attacks every single time. The new hero had been required to be with him after each attack, as the commission kept putting them on leave from the gas until they felt it was out of their systems. After the first couple of days, heroes had begun carrying several gas masks on their persons at all times. Ones for their own use and to provide to civilians should they encounter this new gang who always seemed to have members no matter how many were arrested. Every hero who worked with Dauntless was still put on leave regardless on if their mask was used or not though. To anyone with even half a brain it was clear that the HPSC was trying to strong-arm young Dauntless into being a sidekick to one of their own pawns. Unfortunately, that just meant that roughly 60% of the general public, at least, failed to notice. Fortunately, however, he was not the general public. With what he knew, what his new allies could dig up, and what could be proven thanks to a certain lie detection quirk, the HPSC was not being inundated with lawsuit after lawsuit. The class action lawsuit from all the various heroes forced to remain on unpaid leave whether they'd worn gas masks with no exposure to the hallucinogens or if they were cleared by any independent doctors. The class action lawsuit from the various people who weren't getting as much protection from hero patrols due to said heroes being forced on leave by the HPSC's little games. Which was served after the lawsuit from the wronged heroes was made public. The lawsuit Nezu helped Mrs. Midoriya file. If the stain fight was the reason for the HPSC to help push for Midoriya to be forcibly drafted into hero work. To not get any choice in the matter when, as crude as the comparison was, most hero work was essentially commission-based. They make their own hours and get paid by result. Thus, a lawsuit about the HPSC refusing to pay him for the work to catch Stain and his share of the bounty. And with that the floodgates were opened. Anyone and everyone who had issue with the HPSC started filing lawsuits, adding to the fire as Curious stoked the public opinion about it. He made sure to filter out the cases that would be an issue with, but all others he and his allies made sure to help where they could. If all went well this would let him and his allies begin pushing changes through. To remove most if not all the power of the HPSC. Let a new organization rise to take its place. One where he and Detnerit could do what they could to push through more acceptable laws. But for now, he had to focus on the upcoming exams for his students before the summer break. The most recent staff meeting had been finalizing the final matchups for the various students of each year they hadn't settled on. Mostly the first year class A admittedly. Each student was being tasked to fight someone who had some sort of advantage or counter to them. To test how creative the students could be in overcoming challenges. Yuga Aoyama would be going against a hero X-less. A pro hero who also possessed a laser quirk that was much more efficient at this point. Aoyama wouldn't be able to rely on a single well-placed range shot before his stomach issues overcame him. Hopefully the young man would be able to learn by battling a more experienced laser user. Sayu Asui would be going against Selkie. Someone with a very similar quirk in that they were both mutants who excelled at aquatic arenas. The difference being that Selkie's made him far physically stronger. Tenyo Ida's opponent would be Mystic. The young man was fast, but at the moment struggled in doing any attacks that weren't a straight line on the ground. But Mystic's platforms would let him simply rise above such strikes. Ida would have to adapt. Masher Aojiro would be tasked with battling Fourth Kind. Another close combat specialist who also possessed additional limbs. A more experienced version of young Ajiro himself. Enki Kaminari would be combating another electric user. A hero from Re Destro's force known as Amplivolt. Someone who could manipulate and resist electricity. Kaminari's normal attacks would only make his opponent stronger. Koji Koda would be battling the hero Centipeder. The young man had a crippling fear of insects which was holding back his own quirk's capabilities. Young Koda would have to fight his own fears to pass. Akito Sato would be battling Fat Gum. Young Sato tended to just try and brute force his way through each problem he faced. Given his quirk lowered his intellect, this was an issue. So, an opponent he couldn't just overpower would be a good test for growth. Mizo Shoji would be fighting the third-year student Amajiki. Another young man who could alter their own appearance to monstrous levels. Growing extra limbs. His hope was the young man picking up a few tricks from someone with such a similar skillset. Ayokajiro would be going against Deadshot. Someone who was trained in stealth to teach her not to rely on her sense of hearing. With any luck, she'd pick up her own ambush tricks from the encounter. Antasiro, unfortunately for him, had to go against Best Genist. Nezu had noted that Mr. Siro's current primary type of tape seemed to be a thick fabric-like composition. Having collected some after a hero class, he confirmed that Best Genist was able to manipulate it. So, it would force the young man to change up how he used his quirk to achieve success and, hopefully, open himself up to new creative ideas. Fumikage Tokoyami would have the opponent of Mr. Blaster as his opponent. Someone who could create bright explosions from his palm. If they were bright enough to require Mr. Blaster to use goggles to avoid blinding himself, then they would force Tokoyami to be creative in avoiding his weakness. Itsuka Kendo would be fighting the hero known as Tiger. Someone with incredible physical strength but also his own body alteration. She had great talent with her combat skills but had to focus on thinking outside the box. Momo Yaoi Rozu would be going against Rock Lock. Someone who could freeze anything he touched in midair and force her to have to either catch him off guard with her creations or overpower him, since once it was frozen, it was most likely useless to her. Bajiro Kirishima and Tetsu, much to his amusement, both got assigned the same opponent. The young heroine Bubble Girl. With those two so focused on just hardening up and tanking everything that came their way, they'd have to adapt to her quirk. Bubbles that contain any smell she wants aren't something they can just harden against. Mina Ashido would be going up against Manuel. The man's ability to manipulate water would let him, to be blunt, water down the young lady's acid, pushing her beyond her current limits. Ichako Uraraka would be fighting Snatch. With his body comprised of sand, he'd be completely immune to her quirk, so she couldn't take him out by removing his gravity. Shoto Todoroki would go against Burnin. Someone intimately familiar with how the fire half of his quirk worked and who would have solid resistance or counters to both ice and heat. Hagakure would go against Ragdoll. Someone who could always find her regardless of any invisibility. Itachi Shinso would go against Mandalay. Someone who could communicate telepathically. This meant she could respond to his quirk without having to set it off by making a verbal remark. Ryiko Yanagi was going to go against her fellow third-year Najire. The girl's telekinesis was powerful, but she'd shown no ability to use it on pure energy, so she couldn't control Miss Hato's attacks. Mirio Tagada would fight Miss Joke. The young man had to make constant rapid calculations with his quirk to use it effectively in combat. But being forced to laugh hard enough that many under said quirk passed out would test just how well he could do those calculations under pressure. And then there was Izuku Midoriya, who'd be forced to defend against his own homeroom teacher. The young man had a truly powerful defensive quirk. But how well would he fare without access to those resistances he'd built up? Would he be able to hold out till he got an opening? What he was most curious though was if the students would figure out the hidden meaning behind his test. Most of them would think that they could only pass by winning. In all honesty, his focus was on how well they improved, how creative they could be, how much they worked for it.